6 o'clock Central African time. A very good morning to you. Welcome to it. This is Rise and Shine. And we are Channel Africa, broadcasting from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa. My name is Asanda Beda. Of course, you can tune in on www.channelafrica.co.za to connect. On YouTube, we are live streaming there at Channel Africa 1. And the SABC Plus app for mobile phones is also where you can tune in. Good morning, Mr. Peter Ndoro.
Good morning, como está?
I'm matching you today. We're both in suits.
So, como está?
Huh? Where am I, Commissioner?
Como está, that's like hello in Portuguese.
Okay, como está?
And then está bom?
Está bom?
Tudo bem?
Tudo bem?
Now, why am I speaking to you in Portuguese? Because today, 50 years celebration for Angolan independence.
Okay.
Yes, and so we'll be looking at that today. So for everybody in Angola, bem-vindo, which is welcome. Thank you for joining us. And we'll be talking about what 50 years on means for you. And I know that you're tracking a story in Tanzania today.
Yes, we are in Tanzania. Lots coming out of there. First of all, the differing reports in terms of how many people were killed in those clashes. The Chadema party, Tanzania's opposition party, the main one, saying it's about 1,000. The government earlier had said it's about 500. And now the church is also speaking out to say more people could have likely been killed. They voicing their opinions also after one of the church leaders had their church deregistered for speaking out against the government. So quite a lot happening in that country.
But first, let's catch you up with the day's news with Matavelo Mahape. Good morning to you, and that'll be followed by the sports headlines. Who's doing sports this week?
It's going to be swallowed by the sports. Is that what you wanted to say?
I know.
Sports swallows everything. It takes over everything, doesn't it?
And who is on the sports desk today?
We've got Fikile Lingwati today.
Of course.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Starting off with this story, Guinness junta leader Mamadi Doumbouya and 8 other candidates have been approved to run in next month's presidential election. Doumbouya had vowed not to run when he seized power in the West African country in 2021, but a new constitution pushed by the military-led government and approved a referendum in September opened the door to his presidency. Or rather candidacy. Doumbouya put his name forward last week, a move that could put him in power for another 5 years. The election scheduled for the 28th of December is intended to cap a formal transition to civilian rule. And the Congress of the People Party in South Africa has condemned what it says are U.S. President Donald Trump's baseless attacks on the country and its G20 presidency. COPE has described its claims as a way to divide the world. Trump's decision to boycott the G20 summit, citing an alleged human rights abuses against Afrikaners in South Africa, has been widely criticized and unfounded and ignorant. South Africa's government has rejected Trump's statements, saying it's committed to democracy, peace and multilateralism. COPE acting national chairperson Pekti Diketsi.
It is not surprising. Donald Trump has a record since his first term of office of boycotting international multilateral institutions. Recently, he's pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. He's pulled out of the World Health Organization. So we believe that Donald Trump is motivated by his desire to undermine multilateral institutions, and his reckless rhetoric undermines the very spirit of cooperation that the G20 represents.
And the South African Parliament's ad hoc committee is investigating options to get testimony from remanded detainees Vusmusi Ket Matlala. The committee was established after KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's allegations of criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference in the justice system. Matlala, who is facing charges of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder and money laundering, is being held in the Kgosi Mampuri C Max prison in Pretoria. The committee met yesterday to discuss a draft report that will be presented to the Speaker of the National Assembly, Toko Didiza, regarding a request for a second extension. Ad hoc committee's chair Molapi Lekanyani.
The senior counsel is making arrangements with the legal team to have virtual consultations with Mr. Matala, and the security team of Parliament went to Pretoria to make an assessment whether the committee can go and conduct its hearings there, or whether the committee will want to do virtual hearings.
And the South African Commission of Inquiry into allegations of efforts or attempt to halt the investigation or prosecution of Truth and Reconciliation Commission TRC cases has been adjourned until the 26th of November. The adjournment follows an objection concerning evidence leader Advocate Ishmael Semenya SC, who previously advised the National Prosecuting Authority on a prosecution policy later declared unconstitutional. Reacting to the postponement, the South African Minister of Human Settlements and former Minister of Justice Thembi Simelane, whose sister Nogutula was killed by apartheid security forces in 1983, shared her disappointment.
Well, I expected it. Almost 35 years into this case with the state. So I've never had responses on time, either for an investigation, either for a trial, either for an inquiry. So I think it's a pattern. We are patient, understandably so, as victims, because the only thing we need is justice.
And a court in Paris has granted the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy early release from jail just weeks after he started a 5-year sentence. He was found guilty of conspiring to obtain election campaign funds from the late Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. He will now be placed under judicial supervision pending his appeal. Speaking to a court in Paris via video link, Sarkozy described his time in solitary confinement as grueling and a nightmare. Public prosecutor Damien Brunet recommended that Sarkozy's request for release be granted, but that the former president be banned from contacting other witnesses in the so-called Libyan dossier. For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Matabela Mahape.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Hugo Broos wants to win against Zambia to lift Bafana Bafana's ranking. And the International Olympic Committee is on the verge of banning transgender women from female categories. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
It's 8 minutes past 6 Central African Time, and every day after the 6 o'clock news, we bring you something that we call the Africa Roundup. And essentially what it is that we take a look back in the last 24 hours and in a concise way, we keep you up to date with all the news and the news events that have taken place across the continent and a little bit beyond, to make sure that you're up to date and also set you up for the news day ahead. And we begin the Africa Roundup with this news. UN humanitarian officials are warning that the crisis in Sudan's North Darfur state is worsening, and violence there spreads beyond the state capital Al Fasher. Since the rapid support forces seized the city on October the 26th, clashes along key access routes have trapped civilians and cut off aid. Farhan Haq, who's the deputy spokesperson for the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, tells us more.
Since that date, nearly 89,000 people have fled Al Fasher and nearby villages, according to the International Organization for Migration. Many have sought refuge in the localities of Tawala, Melit, and Sarafumra, while others have traveled to Daba in northern state. In Tawala and Daba, we and our partners are providing food, clean water, sanitation, healthcare, and psychosocial support, among other essential aid, but needs far exceed the available resources. Some families from El Fasher have sought refuge in the locality of Tina, near the Sudan-Chad border, where local volunteers report that more than 3,000 displaced people urgently need food, shelter, and healthcare. Across the border in eastern Chad, already overwhelmed host communities and our partners are preparing for new arrivals as people continue to seek safety and assistance.
Former Botswana President Ian Khama has criticized some African leaders for seizing power, describing Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan as illegitimate. Speaking at the second anniversary of Pan-Africanism at Lukenya University in Kenya, Khama said he does not recognize Suluhu as Tanzania's rightful leader.
When an African leader, in order to stay in power, will resort to killing his or her own people, in order to stay in power, will rig an election, as if they are God's gift to their country. And my apology to those who may come from Tanzania, but I'm mentioning this because they are your neighbor, that the recent election and what transpired, the killings around that election, I for one do not recognize the person who was inaugurated as the president of Tanzania. She is an illegitimate president. But the sad story does not stop there. Recently, we saw another inauguration of a 90-something-year-old president in Cameroon. 90-something years old, who can hardly walk, but still wants to be president.
Cuba's new ambassador to South Africa, Fakhry Rodriguez Pinelo, says that Havana is largely satisfied with Pretoria's handling of its G20 presidency. Pinelo has just assumed the role of one of Cuba's key allied countries.
We are very excited to be here in South Africa. We are newly appointed, so we are still getting the hang of the things here in South Africa, but the history speaks for itself. Cuba and South Africa have had a long-standing relation for many years, not only in the supporting the liberation struggle in South Africa, but in other countries of Africa also. So from many decades ago, there were already Cubans and South Africa getting together to join forces. So we are building on that. That is our mission here. We think that we have to honor the vision of Mandela and Fidel for what our bilateral relations have to be for now and the future.
Duduzile Zuma Sambudla, daughter of former South African President Jacob Zuma, has appeared in court as her trial begins over charges of inciting public violence and terrorism. The case relates to the deadly unrest that swept parts of South Africa in July of 2021. David Doyle reports.
The charges stem from social media posts Zuma Sambudla made during the riots, which erupted after her father was arrested for contempt of court. More than 350 people died in the unrest, which began in KwaZulu-Natal province and spread to Gauteng. There was also widespread looting and destruction. It was one of the most violent episodes in South Africa's post-apartheid history, crippling supply chains and exposing deep socio-economic fault lines in the country. At the court on Monday, Zuma Sambudla, who is a prominent figure in her father's Umkhonto we Sizwe party, pleaded not guilty to the charges. A spokesperson for the Jacob Zuma Foundation defended her, saying she was exercising her freedom of speech. The trial is expected to run until November 21st.
Right, the Southern African Larger Telescope, or SALT, turns 20 years old, and it remains the largest optical telescope in the Southern Hemisphere. And it's responsible for a number of new discoveries, from the black holes to observing kilonova. Yeah, Dr. Itumeleng Munacheng is an astrophysicist with the South African Astronomical Observatory, and he shares his thoughts.
Well, SALT has played a very big role in South Africa in the development of, or in contributing actually in research in South Africa, but also globally. In the past 20 years, we've seen lots of discoveries and cutting-edge research performed in different topics, areas like things in the solar system, exploding stars and large-scale structures of the universe. So yeah, SALT has been at the forefront of cutting-edge research and high-impact research that's happening globally. So I'm a product of one of the developments of the training of the young generation, and continues to do so. So in the past 20 years, it's been, the quality of the data that we get here has formed a part of master's and PhD research theses, and a lot of it has been using a lot of SALT data.
And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll have more for you tomorrow after the 6 o'clock news. Stay with us, though. Coming up, we're going to take a a deep dive into what's been happening in East Africa, Tanzania, on the radar for sure, given the things that are playing out there. Stay with us for that. Asanda will be talking to Dennis Beru.
Le monde entier a les yeux rivés sur Johannesburg. Les dirigeants des plus grandes économies mondiales se réunissent pour prendre des décisions qui façonneront les nations, les marchés et l'avenir. Vous savez déjà que Channel Africa sera sur place pour vous proposer des débats, des analyses et des points de vue essentiels. Suivez le sommet du G20 les 22 et 23 novembre en direct de l'Afrique. Restez connectés sur Channel Africa.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Right, another way we start our mornings right with Rise and Shine is we, on Tuesdays, bring you the East Africa Wrap. So this is some of the stories that we may have touched on our Africa Roundup, but we delve deeper in terms of analysis as we are joined by one of our resident analysts, Dennis Beru, who is a journalist and team leader at Grassroots Journalism Kenya. And we might add other stories then as far as what's happening in the East African region of our continent. Dennis, always great to catch up with you on Tuesdays. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Asanda. Hope you are fine.
I'm well, thank you very much. Let's go straight to it. Tanzania, we've been talking about this country. Lots happening there in terms of developments on the demonstrations and how many people were killed. We'll get to those figures that are not in parallel, not even matching in any way. But let's start with those who have been arrested. A number of protesters are now being charged with treason, most of them from the Chadema party, which is the main opposition party in the country.
All right. Thank you so much, Asanda. And of course, authorities in Tanzania have charged hundreds of people with treason over demonstration around the disputed pause last month. And of course, in a major escalation of the political tension as the country reels from the violence in which a known number of people were killed. And in addition to the dozens criminally charged in Dar es Salaam, dozens more face treason charges elsewhere, of course, in Tanzania. And according to the charge sheet that became publicly available on Saturday, and of course, wanted suspects include the Joseph Gwajima. Of course, Gwajima is an influential preacher who had his charge deregistered earlier this year after he criticized the government over right abuse. Of course, police also have issued a arrest warrant over some of the top opposition officials who hadn't yet been jailed. Some of them include Brenda Rupia, the communication director of the Chadema opposition group, as well as John Mnyika, who is the secretary general of the party. Of course, Chadema is the main opposition party in Tanzania. And of course, their leader, Tundu Lissu, has been in jail for several months and also faces treason charges after he urged electoral reforms before voting on October 29th. And Asanda, what is happening in Tanzania, of course, we've also seen young people, and one of them is the famous businesswoman who has been arrested just for the crime. People say that, of course, that was really petty because listening to a song that probably was mocking the Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan. And of course, we've seen young people both from Kenya and Tanzania calling for the release of the young people who have been arrested. And of course, people are talking about, the charges, that is a treason. And we all know a treason amounts to a death in most of the African countries, including Tanzania.
As we speak of deaths, the figures that are coming through there in terms of how many were killed in demonstrations, the Chadema party saying about 1,000. The government had earlier said of Tanzania about 500. The church, as you say, is also lending its voice in terms of what's happening there. As you mentioned, one of the influential church leaders, they have their party, the church has had to be deregistered after they had expressed dissent against the government. So the church also saying that it could be a bigger figure than what is being given. How do you think we'll get to actually knowing how many people were killed in Tanzania in these protests after the polls?
Of course, Asanda, we are getting, different figures in regards to the actual number of people who are killed in the post-election violence in Tanzania. And of course, we have seen the Chadema party saying that 1,000 people were killed. At the same time, of course, the government saying that, of course, it is less than 500 people who were killed. And the Kenya Human Rights Commission, which is now the watchdog group in the neighboring country, asserted that in a statement on Friday, 3,000 people were killed. But of course, for the very first time, we've seen the Catholic Church, putting their voice on the death of the Tanzanian people who are demonstrating for what they termed as election that were marred by irregularities. And of course, we've seen raise their voices saying that, of course, government should also give the right figure of the people who are killed. And of course, a few days ago, we saw in social media so many bodies of young people. And there's also an allegation that 7 football players of a local football team were killed inside their house. And we've seen all these videos and photos are going viral. So we might see soon actually how many people were killed, because so many people are interested to know what really happened in the Tanzania election. And of course, the African Union said last week that, of course, they observed the report said that the Tanzania election did not comply with the AU principle. And of course, the normative framework and the international obligation, the standard for the democratic election. And of course, we've seen even the Kenyan president, William Ruto, through an interview saying that, of course, even in a democratic country, you cannot win by 98% of the vote. So we are still waiting to see what will unfold so that the world can know what really happened in Tanzania, and of course, knowing the exact figure of the people who died in the Tanzanian post-election violence.
Interesting that earlier in our Africa Roundup, we heard from the former president of Botswana, Ian Khama, saying that he does not recognize the president, Suluhu Hassan, as a legitimate one. His voice is that she is illegitimate. It will be interesting to see if other former statesmen, because at this stage it will probably be safer for a former statesman than a current statesman to say their views, and to see if others will come forward and say that they don't recognize her. But we need to move on to Uganda now, where the president of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, has now confirmed, he has publicly admitted that his government did indeed detain those 2 Kenyan activists, Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo. We spoke about their release yesterday. Why do you think the Ugandan government initially denied that they detained these 2, and what would have been happening to them now if Kenya and the authorities in your country did not intervene on their behalf?
Asanda Beda, of course, Kenyans were really shocked when they had the Ugandan president Yoweri Museveni say that, of course, he knows that the 2 Kenyan activists were arrested by the Ugandan authorities, and this now contradicts, the initial sentiment from the Tanzanian police authorities, saying that they are not aware of the 2 activists. And even the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kenya, Musalia Mudavadi, admitting that, of course, they've been in contact with the the Ugandan counterparts about, the abduction of the two activists. And now Yoweri Museveni coming out after the two were released and admitting that, of course, the two activists were in his country for weeks and were arrested. And of course, this is after Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo were forced into a car by masked uniformed men after a political event that was supporting the Ugandan opposition leader, Bobby Wine. And of course, the news of their release confirmed on Saturday. But up to that point, authorities, of course, had denied they were being detained. And in an interview where we saw the Ugandan president, Yoweri Museveni, he admitted and said that, of course, he will not allow people to come and meddle in issues in his country. And of course, he also said that he will still abduct those who try to destabilize Uganda, terming it as a very peaceful country. And of course, he also mentioned that the two are known as the perpetrators of the riots in Kenya, and they are trying to do the same thing in Uganda. Of course, Bob Njagi and Oyo were welcomed by the supporters at the Kenya's Jomo Kenyatta International Airport after they were released. And of course, they had to spend 38 days in abduction, and they also expressed, what they really went through in their detention. And of course, Kenya's foreign minister Mudavadi said that their release followed a sustained diplomatic engagement between Kenya and Uganda, which also Museveni admitted that, of course, he received so many calls to have the two released.
Also in Uganda, but in a separate issue, a former rebel leader there by the name of Joseph Kony is now facing charges with the International Criminal Court. It's about 39 charges. Can you take us through to some of these and when they were said to have been committed by Kony?
Of course, judges at the ICC have confirmed the crime and, of course, crime against humanity charges against the longest standing Ugandan leader, Joseph Kony, nearly 2 decades after the court first issued a warrant of arrest. Of course, Kony, who remains at large, faces 39 charges, including murder, sexual enslavement, and, of course, rape, making him ICC's longest-standing fugitive. Of course, the judges of the ICC pre-trial Chamber 3 said that there is a substantial ground to believe that Mr. Kony is criminally responsible for the crimes committed in the northern Uganda. That is between 2002 and 2005, when he commanded the Lord Resistance Army, LRA. And of course, besides the crimes committed by his rebels, the judges said, of course, Kony could also be responsible for 10 crimes he allegedly committed himself, linked to 2 women he forced to become his wives. Of course, the ruling marks the first time an ICC confirmed the charges in a suspect's absence, meaning the case can run formally to proceed to trial if Kony is ever captured. And under the ICC rules, a trial cannot begin without the defendant's presence in court. And of course, the prosecutors said the effort to track down and arrest Kony, who is now 64 years old, are ongoing. And of course, the ruling by the ICC followed a 3-day hearing in September, in which prosecutors and victims' lawyers presented evidence and testimony without Kony's presence. An unusual procedure, of course, that set the stage for Thursday ruling. And we know that Kony has been in the forest in the southern Sudan, and of course, his group, Lord Resistance Army, has been committing a crime against humanity in countries South Sudan, DR Congo, and of course, northern Uganda.
Right, I was going to ask if there are any leads in terms of his whereabouts. So you just answered that for us. Dennis, we're going to leave it for that for now. And we look forward to catching up with you next Tuesday. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you so much, Asanda Beda. Have a good day.
Thank you. Dennis Peru there giving us our East Africa wrap, and that's a zoom into the stories making headlines within this region of our continent. And he is journalist and team leader at Grassroots Journalism Kenya. Let's say good morning now to Matapelo Mohape. She's got our news headlines at 6:30 Central African Time.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Headlines this hour. Guinea's junta leader, Mamadi Doumbouya, along with 8 other candidates, have been approved to participate in the presidential elections scheduled for the 28th of December. And the Congress of the People Party, COPE party in South Africa, has condemned U.S. President Donald Trump's baseless attacks on the country and its G20 presidency, characterizing them as divisive. And the United States says Syria is joining the global coalition to defeat Islamic State militants and is resuming diplomatic relations with Washington. More details on these and other stories at top of the hour.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
It's time now to find out what's been happening in the world of sport. And at our sports desk this week is Fikile Lingwati. Good morning, brother.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Peter. We begin with football news with 2 Southern African teams in the Africa Cup of Nations AFCON group in Angola and Zimbabwe. South African head coach Hugo Broos says that Zambia is the perfect opponent to prepare for the tournament. Bafana Bafana play Zambia at the Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium in the country's Eastern Cape province in what will be their only game in the upcoming international window. Broos has also lined up another friendly match just before their departure for the AFCON and also feels that Chipolopolo are precisely what they are looking for.
When we need friendly games, it's always a problem. And we always play against teams who are on the border of South Africa. Because when we have to go, it costs money and it's always difficult. So we tried always to find someone or a team that can help us to have a good preparation. And Zambia was ready to come. So I think it's a good opponent for us.
Former Ivory Coast striker Salomon Kalou has reflected fondly on his time representing his country at the AFCON, describing it as one of the proudest chapters of his career. Now retired, the 2015 AFCON winner says lifting the trophy with the Elephants remains the pinnacle of his football journey, with Morocco set to host 24 nations next month as Ivorians defend their crown. The former Chelsea forward says he always wore his national colours with immense pride and honour.
Participating in an AFCON is representing your nation, representing your country. I think for us coming back, play for Cote d'Ivoire, representing Cote d'Ivoire in AFCON was something special, you know. And I could see the excitement of Didier, Yaya, myself, Gervinho coming back home and wearing that jersey, going to the African Cup because we wanted to win it for our country.
Kalou adds that the competition has made great strides over the years.
Yeah, it looked very different from when I started. I think now a lot of things improve. The stadium improved, the organization improved, and it gave it the opportunity for, you know, even the kid from the African kid who didn't grow up in Africa and have no relationship with Africa want to come back to play that competition because we elevate that competition. You have such a legend that participate in that competition that contribute to also make that competition appealing.
The International Olympic Committee is undecided in a move of stepping closer to introducing a blanket ban on transgender women from female categories across all sports. IOC President Casey Coventry vowed to bring in the move as part of her election campaign. On Monday, the ban was said to be announced as early as next year. Despite the IOC statement, the likely outcome is that a ban will be introduced, but they are still undecided. In February, US President Donald Trump signed an executive order that prevents transgender women from competing in female categories. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Celebrate generosity. Celebrate you. Channel Africa. Life with gratitude. Visit our new website or download our new app today. Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126 and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So yeah, that's who I am, you know.
It's not just talk. It's your chance to air your views. Share your opinion. Engage with the community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective. This is
Channel Africa.
Let's check in now with the world of business for the first time this morning on this 11th of November. Here's Nosipho Zuma.
Business News on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. In your business news this hour, the Minister of Trade in the United Arab Emirates, Tani Al-Zayodi, says the country could conclude negotiations for a bilateral trade agreement with Chad by the end of the year. Now known as Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreements, or CEPA, the Trade Investment and Cooperation deals are a key element of the oil-rich UAE strategy to reduce its dependence on fossil fuels and bolster long-term growth. Zayodi says bilateral trade between the UAE and Chad stands at $1.9 billion, growing more than 30% last year. Citrus Growers Association CEO Boitego Nchabele says South Africa's citrus industry has recorded its strongest export season to date. He says growers packed over 200 million cartons for international markets, a 22% increase from last year. Dr. Nchabele says favorable weather, improved logistics, and new orchard contributed to the record-breaking performance. He says the bumper season shows the sector's potential to drive exports and job creation. Nchabele has cautioned the industry still facing rising costs and trade barriers.
The imposition of a 30% tariff by the United States on citrus from South Africa had a limited impact on the industry this season. This was because the tariffs came into effect towards the end of the local season and shipments were fast-tracked. We remain very worried about the impact of the 30% tariff in the coming 2026 season. That is why a mutually beneficial trade deal between the United States and South Africa must be finalized urgently.
The Namibian government has cautioned that public education must be prioritized as countries gear up for the arrival of artificial intelligence technologies. Namibian Minister of Information and Communication Technology was speaking on the opening day of the Africa Tech Festival in Cape Town, South Africa, aimed at charting a way forward for Africa's digital economy. She says Namibia is in the initial stages of building digital infrastructure and skills, but is concerned about the spread of information using AI.
We see it being embraced in education, academia, in journalism, in the way people consume on social media platforms. What we don't see is it coming along with the digital literacy, the media literacy the public needs to have. You have deepfake videos and deepfake photos confusing those who cannot tell the fake thing from the real thing. You also see people being scammed out of their hard-earned money or being told they won a prize based on an AI-generated voice that sounds like a credible source.
The Public Service Commission's quarterly bulletin has revealed a regression in the timely payment of invoices to service providers by South African government departments in the 2024-2025 financial year. The PSC says there was a 32% regression in unpaid invoices compared to the 2023-2024 financial year. Commissioners want consequence management instituted against accounting officers who failed to pay service providers within 30 days of receipt of an invoice. Anele Koyiya is the Public Service Commissioner.
The number of invoices paid later than 30 days by national departments was 143,245 invoices, with a rand value of 6.4 billion as at end of financial year. This indicates a regression of 32% or 34,328 invoices when compared to the number of invoices paid after 30 days by national departments in the 2023-24 financial year.
And finally, Francis Renault has ended a project with Valeo to develop a new rare earth-free electric vehicle motor and is looking instead for a cheaper Chinese supplier. Automakers including Renault and General Motors and suppliers such as ZF, Borgwana and Valeo have been developing EV motors which do not require rare earths. In late 2023, Renault said it was working with Valeo on a new, more powerful and more compact EV motor without rare earths. China controls 70% of global rare earths mining and 85% of refining, and Beijing's decision to impose growing export curbs on rare earths has sent the industry scrambling for suppliers. Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 435, and Botswana is 13 pula 132. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 2, and in Zambia is 22 kwacha 64. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 33. Russia is 80 rubles 88. India, it's 88 rupees 62. China at 17 yuan 29. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 58. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,138 and platinum at $1,576 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $63.91 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
And here's your G20 fact for the morning. G20 agreements are made by consensus and are not legally binding treaties. Their implementation depends on the political will of each member nation, though they carry significant weight in the international community. That's your G20 fact for the day.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
Delegates from around the world have gathered in Belém, Brazil, for the opening of COP30, the 30th United Nations Climate Change Conference. This year's summit places new emphasis on technology-driven solutions and the protection of indigenous lands. Bunolo Maribe reports.
In the heart of the Amazon, Belém's Parque da Cidade is now the center of global climate negotiations. Thousands of delegates, activists and business leaders are arriving for 2 weeks of talks aimed at keeping the world on track with its climate goals. With Chief Sustainability Officer for CGI, Matieta, saying this is an opportunity to put technology in the forefront of discussions.
I'm hoping that this is an opportunity for all the stakeholders to come to the table to really talk about what it is everybody can do to reduce the emissions within the context of their own nations, but also what other stakeholders like private sector can do, and also talking about discussions such as the role of technology. I feel like this is probably one of the first COPs that has put technology at the front.
Technology and finance are expected to dominate early sessions, with countries under pressure to turn pledges into practical action, as Yeta elaborated.
I really urge those that are not coming to the table to really step up. And then for those that are setting bold, ambitious goals and not doing anything, this is an opportunity again to really throw some budget into the climate agenda and really step up on achieving those bold, ambitious goals.
But beyond tech, there's also a strong indigenous presence at COP30, with a delegate from the Cultural Survival Organization, Jalma Ramalho, calling for climate justice and fair energy transitions.
Where I come from, lithium mining is destroying our territory. For you, it's green energy. For us, it's red with waste. We want an energy transition that is truly fair and includes our land rights.
As negotiations begin, the gap between rich and developing nations remains wide, with the COP30 being called the conference where words must finally become action, for technology, for justice, and for the planet. Bonulo Maribe, SABC News.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
The bail application of the Zimbabwean politician arrested in South Africa, Job Sikhala, and his uncle will be heard on Wednesday. Sikhala and his co-accused briefly appeared in the Pretoria Magistrates Court before their cases were postponed. The state wants to verify his immigration status in the country before the case can proceed. They're facing charges of being in possession of explosives. Ditaba Tsotetse has more.
Job Sikhala and his uncle were arrested last week on their way to Zimbabwe. Allegedly, they were found in possession of explosives. They have since indicated that the weapons found did not belong to them. Sikhala has been a vocal critic of Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa. According to the Zimbabwean activist Trust Ndlovu, they suspect a foul play.
If you look at these charges or the accusations, they don't add up. They are at odds with of objective standards. First of all, a person of his caliber, a lawyer, would not take such a stupid decision to keep such explosives in a car.
Authorities also want to verify Sikhala's status in South Africa. NPA spokesperson Lumka Mahanjana says that the state has a strong case.
The state does not enroll any cases unless there's a prima facie evidence against the accused persons. The accused persons before the court today were found red-handed in possession of the explosives.
The Zimbabwean governing party, ZANU-PF, has dismissed the claims that it is targeting Sikhala following his arrest. ZANU-PF spokesperson Farai Marapira.
The fact of the matter is this. What you're being exposed to is the usual run-of-the-mill of Zimbabwean opposition. They will commit a crime and try to sensationalize it with politics to try and clean themselves up. But I believe that, as always, the law is very clear. The law will always deal with people that transgress against it. So the opposition can continue to be sensational and they can continue to try and fool as many people as possible. But the truth is the truth, and the truth is stubborn, and the SAPS shall discover and expose the truth, and this is all that we're concerned with as ZANU-PF.
The case will be heard on the 13th November, when Sikhala and Tema are expected to formally apply for bail. Ditaba Tsotetse, SABC News.
The 2025 Diabetes Summit begins today in Johannesburg, South Africa, just days ahead of World Diabetes Day on Friday, the 14th of November. The summit is hosted by a non-profit organization called Diabetes Alliance of South Africa, which advocates for the rights of people with diabetes and work in the space of diabetes prevention and care. The theme for the summit is Innovate for Impact, transforming the future of diabetes in South Africa. Diabetes is the leading cause of death in South Africa. Here's Sisi Sekhalo with more on the story.
Diabetes Alliance of South Africa says that over the years, there's been a number of innovations in terms of management, monitoring, prevention, and many others. They say that those innovations are, however, not just limited to devices and drugs. They also include new ways of doing things, like using social media or WhatsApp to educate patients. However, they elaborate that in the public sector, where the majority of patients are receiving care, these innovations are not available. Chairman of the Diabetes Alliance of South Africa, Dr. Patrick Ngasa Pioti, says that will be their focus.
We'll be talking about management and access to care, surveillance, and research. Surveillance means really to track the condition. You won't believe me, but as it is now, we are not able to know how many people exactly have diabetes in South Africa. If we don't know how many are there, how can we manage the condition effectively? So that's first where we should innovate. We should innovate in having systems that allow us to track the condition and being aware of how many people are having the condition, how many are having complications, how many are well controlled, and so on and so forth, so that we are able to allocate resources effectively. Another theme is education. People living with diabetes need education to really take control of their conditions.
Healthy Living South Africa HILA is a social justice organization which campaigns for access to affordable and nutritious food for all. They are a community partner in the summit. The Chief Executive Officer of HILA, Nzama Mbalati, shares some of the work that they do and how it connects with the summit.
As Dr. Pioti has been talking about, that diet also plays a critical role in the epidemic of diabetes. So we've been running campaigns, including nutrition literacy, with grassroots movements like your Treatment Action Campaign, South African Council of Churches, students, at basic education and tertiary level. We have limited resources, but we have been trying to galvanize the literacy and the understanding, and also people campaigning for access to food in their own localities.
Doctors Without Borders also held a webinar as World Diabetes Day approaches this week. The organization highlighted the importance of creating interventions that are patient-centered, that would respond to the context and the environment in which they work. The organization's access to products for health regional advisor for Africa is Candice Sehoma.
So part of that is, introducing tools that would be patient-centered, and one of those is insulin pens. So insulin is one of the sort of treatments that is used for treating, type 1 and also in some cases type 2 diabetes. And as MSF, one of our priorities are around the administration of insulin.
16-year-old Tabile, whose real name we can't reveal because she's a minor, lives with type 1 diabetes, having been diagnosed with the illness when she was only 13. Although it was once a difficult period, she says she has now come to terms with her condition. This is her message for the upcoming World Diabetes Day.
Just for everyone to be more aware of what exactly is diabetes, because a lot of the time there are a lot of stereotypes and ideas that are associated with diabetes, which aren't necessarily true. The idea that it's caused by eating lots of sweets, or that it only happens to people who are unhealthy, and those kind of ideas I find are really harmful to people who are living with the condition, and also people who are living without it, because you're just generally misinformed. I'll say it's very important for us to support each other, and especially if you're friends with someone who's like living with diabetes, but also as a society in general.
Tapiwa's 12-year-old son suffers from type 1 diabetes, which the doctors believe could be a combination of heredity, environmental factors, and viral infection. Her journey with her son hasn't been an easy one. However, she admires her son's resilience.
I think for his age, I would like to give him credit. He has shown a remarkable resilience, but also he has struggled with depression, and I've had to take him to a clinical psychologist. I've also had to take him to a pediatric psychiatrist. I think it's getting better with time, but it still weighs on him. It does.
According to research by the University of Wits, diabetes affects about 12% of South Africa's adult population. It says death rates in South Africa have declined slightly during the past few years, but the country faces a steady rise in both death and disability caused by increases in non-communicable diseases such as diabetes and cancer. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Segalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And still in South Africa, joy replaced struggle for three families in Orange Farm, which is a township located southwest of Johannesburg in South Africa. And they turned keys indoors they once only dreamed of. For the first time, these families had a place to call home after 30 years of waiting to be allocated homes. The houses were built by volunteers, including Channel Africa's colleagues, starting during Mandela Day in July this year. Volunteers, corporate teams and neighbours stood side by side, proving that unity still builds miracles. Dimakatso Lishuro has the details.
In the heart of Orange Farm, a ripple of change began to spread, one brick, one wall, and one dream at a time. For many families here who've been living in shacks, home has always been a hope, not a guarantee. But this Mandela Day, hope turned into something solid, something they can touch. Habitat for Humanity, alongside corporate partners like Henkel, Sanlam and APSA, joined hands to build homes for those who needed them the most. Stefano Bozelli from Henkel recalls how it all began.
I immediately spoke with my team in order to understand if there was the willingness to take part of this, and everyone was super engaged. Yeah. So that was the start.
This was not the first one. How do you feel about, you've heard some of the comments from the beneficiaries. I'm sure some of it you couldn't hear because they were speaking vernacular, but I mean, you saw the emotion, right? Yeah. How do you feel about the impact that you've contributed to this?
That's really the part that will stay also personally in my memory forever, like seeing the emotion, seeing that we are creating an impact.
He says what started as a corporate project quickly became something deeply personal. Teams traded office shoes for boots, rolling up their sleeves to help lay foundations of dignity.
It's the company that funded, but we are part of our company, and we spend also time as a team together to support, to contribute, and also actually to do, because we also were taking part few days of the construction of the house.
For Sanlam's employee volunteering program manager Mbali Majola, the experience was just as transformative.
It was tough. It was hard over 5 days. We are not constructive people. We are in offices. However, what we really realized as the Sanlam Group and the Sanlam Foundation was the team spirit that came through, and that just was very prominent as people were building. Because they were doing it for purpose. They knew that they were giving 5 people or 5 families a home. And even if it was difficult and they had to put on constructive gloves because of their pedicures and manicures, but they were doing it because they understood that this is what we try to make a difference, and we want people to live in confidence.
Another sponsor, Absa Bank's Simpiwe Ngobo, says this was more than about shelter, but about legacy.
This is a ripple effect, It will help more generations, We're not just helping the homeowners currently now, but obviously their upcoming generations, generation after generation, they will have a
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine. Every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
It's the top of the hour. Somebody forgot that it is.
You know, time is flying by so quickly. It's scary, man.
That was so funny.
Wow.
Well, we enter the second hour of Rise and Shine, and it's now 7 o'clock Central African. Of course, we're going to be looking at a few situations today. Mali is facing a deepening security crisis, and we look at that in this next hour. Jihadist groups there having blocked fuel supplies. We spoke about that last week. We get an update on that in terms of where we are. And then also Angola, marking the 50th anniversary of its independence from Portugal. My name is Asanda, Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Thanks for joining us. Up next, the news with Matapelo Mahapi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning. Guinea's junta leader Mamadi Doumbouya and 8 other candidates have been approved to run in the next month's presidential election. Doumbouya had vowed not to run when he seized power in the West African country in 2021, but a new constitution pushed by the military-led government and approved in a referendum in September opened the door to his candidacy. Doumbouya put his name forward last week, a move that could keep him in power for another 5 years. The election, scheduled for the 28th of December, is intended to cap a formal transition to civilian rule. And the Congress of the People Party in South Africa has condemned what it says are U.S. President Donald Trump's baseless attacks on the country and its G20 presidency. COPE has described his claims as a way to divide the world. Trump's decision to boycott the G20 summit, citing alleged human rights abuses against Afrikaners in South Africa, has been widely criticized as unfounded and ignorant. South Africa's government has rejected Trump's statements, saying it's committed to democracy, peace and multilateralism. COPE acting national chairperson Pexi Dikgetsi.
It is not surprising. Donald Trump has a record since his first term of office of boycotting international multilateral institutions. Recently, he's pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. He's pulled out of the World Health Organization. So we believe that Donald Trump is motivated by his desire to undermine multilateral institutions, and his reckless rhetoric undermines the very spirit of cooperation that the G20 represents.
And the Foundation for Human Rights in South Africa has expressed disappointment in what it says is a lack of seriousness on the part of the party's involvement in the Kampempe Commission in Johannesburg that is probing the failure to prosecute TRC cases. This follows the decision to adjourn the Commission's proceedings until the 26th of November. This is to give the NPA and the Ministry of Justice time to submit for the recusal of Commission evidence leader Advocate Ismail Semenya. NPA has requested Advocate Semenya to step down due to a potential conflict of interest. Said Kimi is the Foundation's executive director.
If they had applied their minds from the very moment the commission was set up, they would have been prepared to file their papers in time, which they weren't. They would have been prepared to lodge objections if they felt those were reasonable. They didn't. And you have to ask, are they taking this inquiry seriously at all? The president instituted this commission of inquiry, and members of his government are treating it with disdain. And that, I think, is something that has to be answered as well.
Onto this now, the Museum of West African Art in Benin City, Nigeria, is expected to hold its grand opening event today. The museum in Edo State was in part conceived as a home of the Benin bronzes, artifacts looted from there by the British soldiers in the 19th century. The campus includes state-of-the-art preservation and restoration facilities. However, a bitter dispute over the control of the prizes artworks has meant that they are not at the museum, something that appeared to have angered the protesters. And the United States says Syria is joining the global coalition to defeat Islamic State militants and is resuming diplomatic relations with Washington. The announcement came hours after Donald Trump met the Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa at the White House, where he described him as a strong leader.
He comes from a very tough place, and he's a tough guy. I liked him. I get along with him. The new president of Syria. We have to make Syria work. Syria is a big part of the Middle East. And I will tell you, I think it is working and really well. We're working also with Israel on, getting along with Syria, getting along with everybody.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Matapala Mahape.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Proteas brace themselves for the Eden Gardens World Test Championship title defense. And track queens Faith Kipyegon leads Kenyan stars in the most influential African women in sports. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Right, let's take a look at this story now. Mali's security crisis is entering a dangerous new phase. Armed jihadist groups have cut off fuel supplies in key regions and struck military bases and carried out kidnappings that have disrupted transport, trade and schooling. The blockade has deepened an already fragile humanitarian situation, whilst the African Union is warning that instability in Mali risks spilling over into neighbouring countries if coordination is not urgently strengthened. For deeper insight into what's driving this escalation and what the data tells us, we're now joined by Oni Nsabia, who's a senior West Africa analyst at ACLED, and that's the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. Oni, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm just wondering, the latest conflict tracking that you've been doing, how would you characterize the current situation in Mali and the key dynamics that are shaping the crisis right now?
Yeah, I think what is going on at the moment really has marked the year. We've seen a radical change in how militant groups use economic warfare, especially the Al-Qaeda affiliated Jamaat Nusratul Islam wal Muslimin. The crisis has also spread to the southern and western parts of Mali and also impacting the capital of Bamako itself. And the group has been able to sustain this fuel blockade and, as you know, have caused major fuel shortages, but also spikes in prices, electricity outages in major urban centers. So yeah, it definitely has an impact. And I think it's a way for this group to try and destabilize the regime in Bamako. And we will see how it will unfold in the coming months.
As you've said, I mean, these fuel blockades are paralyzing parts of the country. And you've mentioned their objective to make life difficult for the government. Tell us a little bit about the evolution of their operations, their strategies.
Yeah, I mean, the group has existed for nearly a decade now. It was formed in 2017, so it has definitely developed a strategic form of blueprint in all the areas which it operates. So it is spread across 6 countries at the moment, including Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, but also in the coastal states of West Africa, including Benin, Togo, and more recently also established a foothold in Nigeria. And they combine violence, guerrilla warfare, economic warfare by attacking fuel convoys, supply convoys, other commercial convoys, but also markets in villages, telecommunications networks, schools, and public infrastructure. And yeah, by doing so, they combined it also with strategic messaging through propaganda and so forth. And all this combined is really an integrated approach to subvert the authority and legitimacy of sitting regimes.
You've mentioned, I think, 6 countries there. Do we have any idea how widespread groups such as Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam and Muslimin have grown? And are they expanding their control from your view?
Control, that's a sort of rubber band word, but I would say that they're definitely spreading their influence. And yeah, they control to some extent vast rural areas in the countries affected, and they have been spreading fast over the past years as well. And also recruiting from a broader set of ethnic groups, and yeah, by engaging in public outreach and propaganda in very diverse local languages. And they also have developed diverse revenue streams, which has enabled them to sustain their operations. And this is from so-called taxation or even extortion, which they refer to as zakat, artisanal gold mining. They also receive significant income from weapons and ammunition, which they loot from state stockpiles through attacks on military bases and camps. But also
How has
kidnapping
the
for ransom is
Malian
another
army
aspect important
responded
to
on the
mention.
ground? Are they finding it difficult to push back and stabilize the situation?
Absolutely. I think we've seen the impact, and this has been going on for 2 months now. So definitely they have tried to break the blockade, and to some extent they have managed to get the fuel convoys through to the capital, and I think the other day also to the city of Segu. So they have some success, but they have been unable to completely break the blockade. They have responded with airstrikes, with military operations, and so forth, but it's still not enough to maintain the needs of the major cities in the south.
So strategically, they're aimed at the Malian government for sure. But what are the most immediate consequences for civilians on the ground? I guess things like schools closing, food, those become real issues.
Absolutely, it has a paralyzing effect on the economy, but also affects the civilian population. And I think that is the aim with this fuel blockade, to really fragilize the relations between the regime and the civilian population, and in a way try to provoke civilian unrest or even a coup from within the military forces itself. But that is not something that we have seen materialize. And yeah, there is signs of growing discontent, but it hasn't, translated into any major protests on the streets of Bamako or elsewhere in the southern parts of the country yet.
I know that ACLED has tracked shifts in alliances and foreign partnerships. How has Mali's move away from ECOWAS and closer alignment with Russia affected conflict patterns and behavior of armed groups from what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think it has had an effect, since militant groups have, since the coups that has happened in all three Central Sahel countries, also spread to coastal West Africa, as I mentioned, and they have been doing so due to the decline in regional or broader regional cooperation between Sahelian countries and their neighbors. However, they have created their own defense pact, and also operationalized a joint force. However, we haven't seen any major operations take place by this force yet. So yeah, it has really impacted, and turning to Russia hasn't been a solution, or Russia, I wouldn't say have provided a reliable package. And I see the instability that we currently witness testifies to that.
Oni, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and your insights greatly appreciated. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
That was Oni Nsaibia, who's a senior West Africa analyst at ACLED, that's the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, talking to us about the security situation in Mali with the fuel blockades and routes being restricted, causing quite a lot of disruption in the country right now.
Africa at Play with Neto and ETO Chemane.
I've witnessed something fresh, something exciting, and something very inspirational from the president of the country, William Ruto. Whenever athletes are performing to their best level, he always comes on board to reward those athletes, be it football, be it athletics, and not leaving it up to the sport ministry.
The president realizes that sport is a business, and for that reason, he also reduces the number of people who are jobless, because sports now is such a serious business, and for that reason, commercialization of sports is a major way of improving or increasing employment opportunities for the young people, and that is why the president has been very persistent in trying as much as possible to inspire more sports personalities to reduce the baggage of the people who are struggling to get job opportunities in the country among the young people.
Francis F.M. Motegi, our correspondent from East Africa in Nairobi, Kenya.
Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time. Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go.
The mining ministers of Botswana and Angola recently met in Gaborone to discuss closer cooperation in the diamond industry. The talks come as the two Southern African nations explore ways to jointly take control of De Beers, the diamond giant owned by Anglo American. Botswana, which holds a 15% stake in De Beers and supplies around 70% of its rough diamonds, regards the company as a strategic national asset, even as falling global diamond prices continue to weigh on its economy. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Samosa has more.
Angola, which initially expressed interest in acquiring a minority stake in De Beers, has now tabled a bid for a controlling share, a move that could spark a bidding contest with its neighbor. During a meeting briefly opened to the media, Botswana's Minister of Mines, Boholo Joy Kinewedu, and Angola's Minister of Mineral Resources, Petroleum and Gas, Diamantino Pedro Azevedo, discussed opportunities for cooperation in the diamond sector, as well as in energy and logistics. Political economist Kevin Tutani shares economic implications for Southern Africa if Botswana and Angola gains control of De Beers, given the current global slump in diamond prices.
Well, I would say as Angola and Botswana, if they do manage to get control of De Beers, for Southern Africa, this obviously will most likely embolden the governments within the region, that they also have to ensure that they're diligent and take control of that. You know, remember, when it comes to diamonds, with regards to Botswana, they determine 90% of, they actually make up 90% of Botswana's exports and are around 30% of GDP, you know, a sizable amount of government revenue as well. So it is quite sensible for the government of Botswana to want to get more involvement. I mean, it only has 15% stake in De Beers at the moment.
However, he maintains that control should be exercised through reasonable means.
But advisably, that determination to have greater control should be within reasonable means and not on the basis of, senseless expropriation. Regarding to, how it might affect investor confidence, within and regional cooperation in the mining sector, well, investor confidence might be hampered, particularly if these countries, as Botswana and Angola, drive at their goal in a more of a violent manner.
Angola's Mines Ministry said in a statement that the two ministers discussed the interest of both countries in acquiring shares in the multinational De Beers, but did not provide more details. How might a potential bidding war between Botswana and Angola affect investor confidence and regional cooperation in the mining sector? Tutani explains.
Remember, if they want to have controlling stake in this company in De Beers, they have to do their best to expropriate with compensation. We really don't want to call it expropriation, particularly because when it comes to De Beers, we understand that De Beers is ready to do an initial public offering on the stock exchange. That's number one. And it's also willing to do a private placement by selling that majority stake without going the way of the stock market. So the management of De Beers has actually expressed intention to let go of this stock in a professional manner, such that there's no need for expropriation.
As Botswana and Angola weigh their next moves, the outcomes could reshape the balance of power in the global diamond trade and refine Africa's role in controlling its own mineral wealth. Whether collaboration or competition prevails, both nations are signaling a new era of assertiveness in the continent's resource economy. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samos in Johannesburg.
Water security in Africa is taking center stage at the Awisiza Africa and Global South Water and Sanitation Dialogue, which is currently underway in Johannesburg, South Africa. The three-day gathering brings together policymakers, researchers and industry leaders from across the continent to find lasting solutions to water and sanitation challenges. Channel Africa's Lebohang Mabange attended the event and filed this report.
The Awisiza Dialogue is being held under the theme towards sustainable water and sanitation services, highlighting the urgent need to address Africa's growing water challenges while ensuring inclusive development. In his keynote address, South Africa's Deputy President Paul Mashatile said the meeting comes at a critical time for the continent's sustainable growth.
Consequently, the timing of this gathering could not have been more critical, as the security of water and sanitation remains a pressing concern for the sustainable development of our continent. This dialogue surpasses the confines of a traditional forum by bringing together policymakers, technical experts, industry leaders, researchers, community representatives, and international development partners.
As the first event of its kind hosted by Awisiza, the dialogue aims to move from discussion to tangible action. Professor Hamant Kassan, president of the International Water Association, says the focus is on sustainable service delivery and shared progress.
The theme of this event, the inaugural event of Awisiza, is towards sustainable water and sanitation services, which is critical for human well-being, both water and food security and economic development. The program is exciting and we look forward to finding solutions and mobilizing action for impact in order to accelerate and sustain service delivery for all South Africans and Africans in the continent.
The call for inclusivity echoed throughout the discussions, with leaders stressing the importance of involving communities in decision-making. Deputy Minister of Water and Sanitation David Mahlobo warned against leaving citizens behind.
Water cannot be an issue, an impediment for growth, especially when there is massive development in research, technology, industry, and wealth accumulation. With that capacity that we have. But the aspect that Minister said, we must never leave communities behind. Never leave everybody behind. No decisions can be made by policymakers, implementers, and experts and leave communities behind.
There were also calls for greater accountability and regulatory reform in the water sector. Awisiza chairperson Ramateu Munyokolo emphasized the need for an independent regulator to oversee the sector's interests.
We still work without an independent regulator. That independent regulator should represent the interests of our people, should regulate the interests of the water boards, interests of municipalities, interest of the policymaker, which is the department. So that's a call, clarion call, that we make as Awisiza. that we need to move with speed to have an independent regulator. The energy sector has an independent regulator, but we don't have an independent regulator.
Meanwhile, the Vice Minister for Foreign Trade and Development at Finland's Ministry for Foreign Affairs, Pasi Helma, shared insights into Finland's long-term cooperation with African nations on water management and digital solutions.
We have worked decades in Ethiopia and Kenya, providing safe water supply and sanitation for more than 5 million people, mostly in rural contexts. Our long experience with Water Sector Trust Fund of Kenya is very relevant to many countries. Now we are in process of developing digital solutions in the water sector in neighboring Lesotho. This is a very promising investment project that we expect to start next year. Our recent twinning with Namibia has provided great learnings both for Namibia and Finland on transboundary water cooperation and in implementing the Water Convention.
The Alcisa dialogue continues in Johannesburg until this Wednesday, 12th November. And for the duration of the event, Channel Africa's current affairs program, Africa Update, is broadcasting live from the dialogue between 12 and 1 p.m. Central African Time. Tune in for more on the key discussions, expert insights and outcomes emerging from the conference. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg,
The
South
African
Africa.
Peer Review Mechanism 5th Youth Symposium has heard a call for all African Union or AU member states to integrate the youth agenda into entrepreneurship, trade, governance and education. The two-day event is taking place at the 6th Ordinary Session of the 6th Pan-African Parliament in Johannesburg, South Africa. It seeks to recognize and empower youth on the continent as agents of good governance. Tlantla Mahlangu has more.
The 5th APRM Youth Symposium, held under the theme Youth in Governance From Promise to Prosperity, is a collaboration of the South African Department of Public Service and Administration and the Pan-African Parliament. The gathering brought together youth leaders, policymakers, parliamentarians, academics, and development partners from across Africa and the diaspora. It also serves as a strategic platform for intergenerational dialogue and evidence-based policy engagement, providing an opportunity to explore innovative ways to strengthen youth participation in governance, peace building, innovation, and economic transformation. Laila Dahi, chair of the Pan-African Parliament Youth Caucus, says young people need to be empowered.
We need to improve the youth skills. We also need to improve mental health and wellness as a key element. As you know, health is not a luxury. It has to be the standard. As we are closing on the 20th anniversary of the Pan-African Parliament, we need to make this an example with the young people at the core. The political framework allows, we want to move from paper to practical application. So we want to measure the progress, not just with the policies that are adopted, and we hope that the symposium will be the opportunity to respond to all these concerns on the minds of the young people.
Amongst the objectives of the symposium is to recognize and empower youth as agents of good governance and sustainable development, as well as strengthen interlinkages between AU institutions, national governments, and youth networks for participatory governance. Ahmed Bening, Secretary General of the Pan-African Youth Union, called on leaders to be more decisive on the matter of Sudan and other conflicts across the continent.
UNICEF, a few days ago, declared Sudan as the largest humanitarian crisis in the world. Yet, we have leaders on the continent that are more concerned about Ukraine, either than the catastrophe on our own continent. We have young leaders that are more interested in having conversation about what is happening outside the boundaries of Africa. Yet, we have an existing disaster, and it appears we see nothing wrong with it. I want to use this opportunity to call on our leaders present, the African Union, the APRM, the Pan-African Parliament, and all stakeholders to be decisive on the matter of Sudan and other conflicts across the continent.
He also told the symposium that young people on the continent are not impressed with the lack of leadership by some governments.
When we speak about unconstitutional changes of government, African governments often would bury their heads as if they are not aware of why we have coups happening. Of course, the young people of the continent are not excited about your leadership. The young people of the continent are not impressed at the kind of services you provide. The young people of the continent feel betrayed by the presidents, the ministers, and those that lead our respective countries. And so, as long as they remain unimpressed, as long as they remain disappointed, expect more protests, expect more revolutions, expect more coups on the continent. And the young leaders in this room, we can sing the rhetorics of democracy, good governance, and whatever it is. But young leaders will support coups on the continent if our leaders do not stand up to the occasion.
The symposium, which ends on Tuesday, will see an intergenerational dialogue and thematic discussions on peace, governance, innovation, and reparative justice, as well as an exhibition of youth-led innovations, research, and creative initiatives. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Ntlandla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
And now at 7:30, just 30 seconds after that, is time for news headlines. Here's Matapelo Mohape.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Headlines this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump's boycott of the G20 summit based on alleged human rights abuses against South Africa's Afrikaners has been criticized as unfounded. And South Africa's health department will launch an initiative today to develop the country's first vaccine in over 50 years aimed at cholera prevention. And Donald Trump has threatened to sue the BBC over a documentary which misinterpreted his comments before his supporters stormed the Capitol building in January of 2021. More details on these and other stories at top of the hour.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Always with an African perspective, let's find out what's happening in the world of sport as we say good morning once again to Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And we start off with cricket news. South Africa's Proteas face a stand challenge in Kolkata this Friday as they take on India in the next leg of the World Test Championship title defense. With just 3 days to prepare, the squad arrives fresh off a gritty win in Rawalpindi, but Eden Gardens is no easy stage. Despite minimal training time, the Proteas are banking on belief, resilience, and a proven ability to thrive under pressure. India, dominant at home and hungry for points, will test every layer of South Africa's depth. Their recent 8-wicket win over Pakistan in Rawalpindi to level that series 1-1 has injected fresh confidence into the squad. Now, football news. Egypt is taking a full-strength squad to an AIN International Cup in the United Arab Emirates this month. This is as they prepare for the Total Energies CAF Africa Cup of Nations finals in Morocco, where it will be looking for its first continental title in 15 years. Egypt has won more Cup of Nations rounds than any other country, but its success came in 2010. The Pharaohs will be among the more fancied teams at the tournament in North Africa, where it is paired in Group B with Angola, South Africa and Zimbabwe. Coach Hossam Hassan has selected 26 players for the AIN International Cup, where Egypt takes on fellow World Cup finalists Uzbekistan on the 14th of November and then plays next game against either Cape Verde or Iran. The matches are all at the Hazza bin Zayed Stadium. With two Southern African teams in the Africa Cup of Nations AFCON group in Angola and Zimbabwe, South African head coach Hugo Broos says Zambia is the perfect opponent to prepare for the tournament. Bafana plays Zambia at the Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium in the country's Eastern Cape province in what will be their only game in the upcoming international window. Brewers has also lined up another friendly match just before their departure for the AFCON and also feels that Chipolopolo are precisely what they are looking for.
When we need friendly games, it's always a problem. And we always play against teams who are on the border of South Africa. Because when we have to go, it costs money and yeah, it's always difficult. So we tried always to find someone or a team that can help us to have a good preparation. And yeah, Zambia was ready to come. So I think yeah, it's a good opponent for us.
Let's end with athletics. Kenyan athletics icon Faith Kipyegon has once again etched her name in history after being named among the 2025 honorees of the 50 most influential African women in sports. The continental recognition is celebrating trailblazing women shaping the future of sports across Africa and the diaspora. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fidel Nwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Leo tujadili kuhusu chipukizi wanaoimba nyimbo za wasanii wengine. Unadhani hili linatokana na nini, Omari?
Nadhani kweli kwamba tukizama muziki ya sasa, hasa wasanii ambao ni chipukizi, kwa kweli kwamba yani karibu kutoka muziki wao wenyewe, lakini wanakuwa wanapenda kuhubiria muziki ya zamani hizo muziki ya wengine ambao ni taimbo.
Wengine wanadai kufanya hivyo ni kupromote vipaji vyao haraka ili waweze kujulikana. Je, yawezekana kukawa na ukweli wowote au ndio kukosa kabisa kipaji cha kuandika mistari?
Ndio, unaona kwamba msanii anapoazimia kwamba kuchukua wimbo mwingine wa msanii mwingine na kurudilia yani mara mbili sivyo, haionyeshi kwamba yani ndio wanaanza kazi ya muziki aizalini, lakini ukiangalia kabisa asilimia kubwa utakuja kuona kwamba wanakosa ile mawazo ya kutunga muziki.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Where Africa's voices rise, with stories that matter, we lead the conversation.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
From the African perspective, we now get an update in the world of business, and that's brought to us by Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. In your business news this hour, the Organization on Doing Tax Abuse in South Africa, OUTA, says the constant postponement and the rollout of the administrative adjudication of road traffic offences, or ARTO, proves that the system is unworkable in its current form. The Transport Minister, Barbara Creecy, has announced that the rollout of the system, which was due to start next month, has been postponed to July next year. Creecy said the postponement was necessary as some municipalities are not ready. ARTO aims to curb the high number of road fatalities in the country, among other things. ARTO CEO Wayne Juvenage.
The system is so administratively challenged, it's very cumbersome, it hasn't really involved enough of meaningful stakeholder input. We keep telling them this, so we're not surprised this is pushed out again, and we don't even think it'll be ready to be launched in July next year. You remember even 2 ministers ago, it was Fikile Mbalula who was there saying it's coming now, get ready, and here we sit 2 years later. So yeah, it's a long way off, we believe.
South Africa's Communication and Digital Technologies Minister Solly Malatsi says artificial intelligence, or AI, must be used to support democracy, not frustrate it. Malatsi says AI comes with risks of manipulation, especially for achieving political ends. He was speaking yesterday on the opening day of the 3-day Africa Tech Festival in Cape Town, aimed at charting a way forward for Africa's digital economy.
Any technology must be geared towards enhancing our democratic principles, uplifting communities, and most importantly, steering governments towards better governance. But we know, particularly with AI, in particular generative AI, that it comes with risks, particularly those that may be manipulated and in the political context to spread misinformation. And that's why there's always a major focus on the ethical use of AI.
The Public Service Commission's quarterly bulletin has revealed a regression in the timely payment of invoices to service providers by South African government departments in the 2024-2025 financial year. The PSC says there was a 32% regression in unpaid invoices compared to the 2023-2024 financial year. Now, commissioners want consequence management instituted against accounting officers who fail to pay service providers within 30 days of receipt of an invoice. Anele Kloyiya is the Public Service Commissioner.
The number of invoices paid later than 30 days by national departments was 143,245 invoices, with a rand value of 6.4 billion as at end of financial year. This indicates a regression of 32% or 34,328 invoices when compared to the number of invoices paid after 30 days by national departments in the 2023-24 financial year.
The Minister of Trade in the United Arab Emirates, Tani Al-Zadoui, says the country could conclude negotiations for a bilateral trade agreement with Chad by the end of the year, now known as Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreements, or CEPA. The trade, investment and cooperation deals are a key element of the oil-rich UAE strategy to reduce its dependence on fossil fuels and bolster long-term growth. Ziodi says bilateral trade between the UAE and Chad stands at $1.9 billion, growing more than 30% last year. And finally, oil prices have dipped in early Asian trade today, trimming gains from the previous session as oversupply concerns outweighed optimism over a potential resolution to the U.S. government shutdown. Brent crude futures fell 13 U.S. cents to $63.93 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was at $60 a barrel, also down at 13 cents. Both benchmark gains around 14 cents in the previous session. Your financial indicators: one US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira for 135, and Botswana is 13 pula 132. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling too. And in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 64. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 33. Russia is 80 rubles 88. India, it's 88 rupees 62. China at 17 yuan 29. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 58. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,138 and platinum at $1,576 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $63.91 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nusi Posuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Celebrate life every day. Tune in to Channel Africa. Stay connected through a new website and free mobile app.
Thousands of people in southern Somalia are being forced from their homes by severe drought, with many making the long journey to refugee camps in Kenya. A new report from Amnesty International warns that both Somali authorities and the international community have repeatedly failed to protect those affected, exposing them to hunger, disease, and family separation. Joining us now is Dr. David Ngira, senior researcher at Amnesty International, to discuss the findings. Dr. Ngira, good morning to you and thank you for making time.
Good morning. Good morning to you too.
So your report highlights the human cost of drought in southern Somalia. Can you summarize the findings of this report?
So Somalia is one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. I think it is the 7th most climate vulnerable countries in the world. And this research has investigated drought between 2020 and the end of 2023. The research was done last year. And our findings indicate that the failure by the Somalia government to adequately protect in terms of providing health, providing food, and providing water to people affected by drought in southern Somalia translated into displacement into IDP camps in Somalia. And because there was inadequate services also in the IDP camps, many people ended up moving to Dadaab refugee camp in Kenya. In particular, we noted that people walked long distances. People told us they would even walk for 2 days or 3 days return to get food or to get water. And this was extremely unsustainable. So whole villages were evacuated. When we met most of the displaced persons, they had moved in groups of 30, 40, 50 families and individuals, and therefore emptying whole villages. But the most urgent thing we noted was that the drought led to drying up of water sources, and then people used contaminated water, resulting into cholera outbreaks, will kill thousands of people. But even in cases when they could reach health facilities, which were very scarce, the longest distance recorded was 1,000 kilometers away. These facilities did not have medicines and sometimes no doctors. And they also charged fees which the people did not have. So it didn't really matter whether you could get to hospital or not. Most people affected by cholera and also malnutrition could just not access health services. And that's why when you look at the arrivals in Dadaab, many women, especially pregnant women and children, arrived malnutrition. Then the World Food Program and other humanitarian actors operating in Dadaab had to, put them through special interventions to try and see if they could regain their normal health.
And the report, as you say, says Somali authorities have not adequately protected those communities that are affected by drought. So as far as government's response and the gaps that you've observed in that response, I guess you mentioned a few there, but those are more reactive. But on a proactive government response, what can government do, as droughts are also natural disasters? Have you noticed gaps there?
Yes. So Somalia government has... although it lacks adequate resources, I must say, and I'll address that in a little bit, it has not adequately addressed and allocated enough resources to deal with this problem, especially health, water, and food. Their budgetary allocation, internationally, we believe a country should allocate about 10% of the budget to food production and agriculture. Somalia allocates far much less. A country should allocate about 15% based on the Abuja Declaration to Health. Somalia allocates less than 5%. And so in its own budgeting, Somalia has not taken drought seriously because the amounts allocated towards sectors that have to do with drought are so limited compared to the problem. Now, the other challenge is that the area affected by drought, that is southern and central Somalia, also happen to be the area where Al-Shabaab is very active. And so Al-Shabaab has made it difficult to access this area, both by humanitarian actors and by government. And therefore, we believe government's failure to deal with this Al-Shabaab problem is trying, and we must recognize, but it has not adequately dealt with this problem, has limited access of humanitarian actors. So, imposes, other than the impact of the drought on water sources, Al-Shabaab imposes taxes. So for you to fetch few available water sources, you have to pay taxes to Al-Shabaab. For you to trade, you have to pay taxes to Al-Shabaab. All this then translated into people moving, because if you are a livestock trader and all your animals have died, but you had a tax obligation to Al-Shabaab, then they would kill you or beat you up, and so you end up living. You also notice that this area of Somalia relies on two main rivers, River Juba and River Shabelle, both of which start in the Ethiopian highlands. And during drought, both of them, River Shabelle dried completely, while River Juba had extremely reduced water that could not support irrigation, because a lot of people along that stream rely on irrigation. So I must say the failure by government to deal with this, because making people rely on two rivers when clearly climate is making them unsustainable for agriculture is not is not proper. But the problem is not just Somalia government. We notice that Somalia has not adequately received international finance, rather climate finance internationally, to deal with this problem. And generally speaking, about 50% of climate adaptation financing coming to Africa goes to countries like Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, the more economically better off countries. And the poorest countries account for just about 18% of climate adaptation financing. So we believe international community should increase more adaptation financing to Somalia. And this adaptation financing should be in terms of grants, not in terms of loans. And we know Africa, now that we're talking about COP, Africa needs about 100 billion and more to deal with this problem. That's in terms of adaptation financing. But so far it's received just about 11 billion, which is, and most of it is in terms of loans anyway, which is grossly inadequate. So we call upon the international community to increase adaptation financing to countries like Somalia to be able to deal with this particular problem.
Would that be the immediate steps then that you are calling on international partners? Because also Somalia contributes quite little to global warming, that it should suffer this greatly. And clearly the government is incapacitated.
Yes, so one call is to the international community, especially the developed countries with clear obligations under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, to enhance their contribution to Somalia, but to Somalia itself, because we sometimes call for debt waivers to countries to be able to deal with such situations. But Somalia received the debt relief last year from World Bank and IMF, which reduced their debt from about 1.4% of their budget to about 0.1. It was believed that this reduction would translate into them increasing more budgeting for health services. But instead, Somalia reduced health budget from 8% of the budget to 4% of the budget. So much as we are calling on the international community to increase their financing to Somalia, we are also calling on Somalia to try and increase budgetary allocations domestically to sectors that are important in climate resilience. That is food production and agriculture, health and water.
Dr. Ngira, we'll leave it there for today. We thank you so much for your valuable insights.
Thank you very much.
Dr. David Ngira is senior researcher at Amnesty International, joining us there on the line on the urgent climate and displacement crisis in Somalia, a report that Amnesty International has given us that underscores the human cost of drought and the pressing need for both Somali authorities and the international community to intervene.
Now, the South African Commission of Inquiry into allegations of efforts for attempts to halt the investigation or prosecution of Truth and Reconciliation Commission (TRC) cases has been adjourned to the 26th of November 2025. Now, this adjournment follows an objection concerning evidence leader Advocate Ishmael Semenya, who's a senior counsel who previously advised the National Prosecuting Authority on a prosecution policy that was later declared unconstitutional, a policy that may have contributed to the very issues that are now under investigation. Channel Africa reporter Michael Mbewe has more.
Chaired by retired Constitutional Court Justice Sisi Kampepe, the Commission seeks to uncover why hundreds of cases identified by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 1995 for possible prosecution were never pursued. 22 families of the victims sued South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa for about $9.7 million in damages for the delays in the TRC cases, where a total of 150 TRC cases recommended for prosecution. Most had never been enrolled. The proceedings began on Monday at the Sayabono Discovery Center in Johannesburg, with arguments surrounding evidence leader Advocate Ishmael Semenya, who is believed to have advised the NPA to take a prosecution policy of amnesty. Here is retired Concord Judge Sisi Kampepe.
We consider it prudent that before oral evidence is presented to the Commission must hear objections, and in particular, the issue of recusal, which has been sharply raised by Advocate Moroka on behalf of the Department of Justice and Advocate Gwala on behalf of the National Prosecuting Authority. At this stage, I would like to invite Advocate Moroka to hear her on the issue of recusal.
Representing the Department of Justice, Advocate Khomotso Moroka, SC, responded.
If I may start off by referring to the final prayer in our papers.
Yes.
What we have said there is that we are pursuing the objection today. We made it very clear that today is not an application for recusal of Mr. Semenya.
Yes.
The minister wrote a letter to the commission personally to say she has concerns and she's minded to move an application for recusal.
Yes.
I am not here instructed to do that today.
Yes.
So
yes.
for today, I'm pursuing the objection that was raised
Yes.
at the second hearing of the commission.
In seeking clarity on how should this inquiry proceed with this issue at hand, Justice Kampepe posed the following question to Advocate Moroka.
And Ms. Moroka, how do you propose we deal with the issue of recusal? Because it seems to be foremost in these proceedings. If we proceed with the objections without the issue of recusal having been settled, where is that going to leave us?
In clarifying the matter, Advocate Moroka told Commissioner Chairperson Sisi Kampepe that in case Semenya is conflicted, another evidence leader would lead the witnesses.
If you look at our notice of objection, we had indicated that we abide by a ruling, the ruling that said that for purposes of the issues that Semenya may or may not have been conflicted, another evidence leader will lead those witnesses. We have indicated, we've stated in our objection that we abide that ruling. So we do not have, for the moment, any application before you because I'm made to believe your response was that a substantive application must be brought. We haven't brought that application.
After 10 minutes of adjournment, the Commissioner's chair made the following ruling.
Application for the recusal of Advocate Semenya. It is directed that the National Prosecuting Authority and the Department of Justice are to file their founding papers in the application for recusal by Wednesday, the 12th of November, and answer thereto by Monday, the 18th of November, a reply, if any, by Thursday, the 20th of November. Written argument is to be filed by the parties by Monday, the 24th of November, and oral argument is to be heard on Wednesday, the 26th of November, 2025. Thank you. The proceedings are adjourned.
Reacting to the postponement, South African Minister of Human Settlements and former Minister of Justice Thembi Simelane, whose sister Nokuthula was killed by apartheid security forces in 1983, shared her frustration.
We will wait patiently. We hope to arrive at the truth at a particular time. But if the pace can be picked up, it's very much appreciated. What angers me more is that the state did not discover the registration of Semenya this morning. They knew. So they could have approached the chair, they could have approached the commission, they could have filed their papers if they are not in agreement with Advocate Semenya than us coming in this shabby manner to come and withdraw or put into a hold the hearings. Everybody has been registered. We have always been having Howard Vani, Murray, yours as family member. We don't have any other creativity that we can do or bring to the fore. And I think the state, when it set the inquiry, it should have read it itself. I mean, I become livid actually when I get to think about it. But it's okay. We work with what we have.
We also spoke with Lukanyo Talata, whose father fought Talata, one of the 4 anti-apartheid activists from Cradock, known collectively as the Cradock 4, was assassinated by the apartheid government in 1985. Talata said these kinds of delays are unfortunately not surprising.
Well, we're not surprised because remember, if you can deny someone justice for murder, what does it mean to you not to cooperate with a commission of inquiry? And unfortunately, this is what we've seen from our government, whether it's Ramaphosa's government, whether it was Zuma's government, or whether it was Mbeki's government. This obfuscation, this lack of taking TRC matters seriously is something that is a thread in these various administrations, and it's sad to see because the ANC is in government because of the sacrifices of our fathers and many others who laid down their lives for this freedom that we enjoy today.
Oral hearings will commence on the 26th of November 2025. Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
Do you know how many commissions we've actually had? in the country of South Africa. And this
Right.
is just on the formal commission side, because we know that the
Yeah.
president calls for a commission, but also on another
Yeah.
hand, the premier of a province
Yeah.
can also call, and a province can also do their own investigation. We've had about
Yeah.
20 just on the official
Wow.
part.
Wow.
Do you remember
Wow.
the Kampepe and the
Oh,
Marikana
yeah, no,
commissions
Kampepe's had a few.
and the Marikana
Yeah.
commissions?
And I just, you know what? What's sad is, sadly, not too much comes out that really has an impact in the end. Reports
Yeah.
are written and everything is in there, but people are concerned that you have a commission, but what difference does it actually make? One hopes that this one will definitely have an impact, though,
Yeah.
because, you know, to suffer twice, once at the hands of the apartheid regime, and then secondly, not to get the justice, is just too much, I think, for most people.
And it is a concern for a lot of South Africans that will something be done. We've even forgotten about some of them. The
Yeah.
Fees Commission, remember,
Oh,
into higher education
oh,
fees.
oh.
The Jinwala Commission. Hey, we've come a long way.
Let's do the news
We've come a
commission now.
long way.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine. Every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
8 o'clock Central African time it is. We enter the third and final hour of Rise and Shine, coming to you live from Johannesburg. That's where our studios are, via www.channelafrica.co.za. Also live streaming on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. I'm Asanda Beda with Peter Ndoro.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for joining us. And it's 8 o'clock, the last hour of the show. And in this hour, I'm hoping that we can go to Angola, because today they're celebrating 50 years of independence. And they gained their independence in 1975 from Portugal. And interestingly, at the same time, Mozambique gained its independence. And I'll tell you the story about it later on, but there was a peaceful resistance regarding flowers taking place in Portugal that eventually saw these countries gain their independence. But you've got to stay with us if you want to hear that story. First, though, here is the news with Matapelo Mahape, and that'll be followed by your sports headlines with Figileli Ngwati.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Starting off with this story, Guinea's junta leader, Mamadi Doumbouya, along with 8 other candidates, have been approved to participate in the upcoming presidential election set for the 28th of December. Doumbouya, who initially pledged not to run after taking power in 2021, decided to enter the race following the approval of a new constitution by the military-led government through a referendum in September. This constitution change facilitates his candidacy, potentially allowing him to remain in power for an additional 5 years. The election aims to finalize the transition to civilian governance. And the Congress of the People Party in South Africa has condemned what it says are U.S. President Donald Trump's baseless attacks on the country and its G20 presidency. COPE has described his claims as a way to divide the world. Trump's decision to boycott the G20 summit, citing alleged human rights abuses against Afrikaners in South Africa, has been widely criticized as unfounded and ignorant. South Africa's government has rejected Trump's statement, saying its commitment to democracy, peace and multilateralism. COPE acting national chairperson Pex Dikhetsi.
It is not surprising. Donald Trump has a record since his first term of office of boycotting international multilateral institutions. Recently, he's pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. He's pulled out of the World Health Organization. So we believe that Donald Trump is motivated by his desire to undermine multilateral institutions, and his reckless rhetoric undermines the very spirit of cooperation that the G20 represents.
And South Africa's Health Department will today host the launch of an initiative aimed at showcasing the country's potential to produce its first vaccine from scratch in over 50 years. Plans for for the vaccine to be for cholera prevention. Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi, accompanied by Deputy Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Nomalungelo Gina, will lead the official launch today at the Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital in Soweto. Health Department spokesperson Foster Mahali.
This milestone represents a significant step in advancing Africa's vaccine self-reliance and also strengthening the country's capacity in order to respond to infectious diseases through local innovation and manufacturing.
And the Museum of West African Art in Benin City, Nigeria, is expected to hold its grand opening event today. The museum in Edo State was in part conceived as a home of the Benin bronzes, artifacts looted from there by British soldiers in the 19th century. The campus includes state-of-the-art preservation and restoration facilities. However, a bitter dispute over the control of the prized artworks has meant they are not at the museum, something that appeared to have angered the protests. And Donald Trump has threatened to sue the BBC over a documentary which misinterpreted his comments before his supporters stormed the Capitol building in January of 2021. In a letter, his lawyers have given the corporation until Friday to make a full and fair retraction, issue an apology and offer compensation. The BBC's David Silito has been following the developments.
Michael Prescott, a journalist who has previously worked as the political editor of the Sunday Times, raised concerns about the editing of a Donald Trump speech in an edition of Panorama broadcast last year. It spliced together words that were 54 minutes apart. Mr. Prescott suggested this made it look as though the president was explicitly urging people to attack the US Capitol. And after the resignations of both the Director General and the head of news, the BBC chairman, Samir Shah, has issued a response. He admitted there had been what he called an error of judgment over the way President Trump's speech had been edited.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Matapala Mahape.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Amajimbo's coach is lamenting lack of thorough preparations ahead of the World Cup ongoing in Qatar. Yannick Sinner dominates injury-hit Oje Alissim in the ATP Finals opener. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Beda Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa. The world is watching Johannesburg. Leaders from the planet's biggest economies gather to make decisions that shape nations, markets, and futures. You already know Channel Africa will be right there, bringing you the conversations, insights, and analysis that matter.
The best is yet to come.
The G20 Summit from the 22nd to the 23rd of November. As it happens, from an African perspective, stay tuned to Channel Africa and get all the G20 analysis. The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Moranziwa means my love in Xitsonga. So if you're listening to this, just know that you are my love. Yes, you and I are an item. We're dating. We are together. So I love you, baby. Why are you blushing? Why are you blushing? Like, haven't you heard somebody confessing their love to you? I mean, you gotta get used to it now, because I'm gonna tell you this every day, that I love you. I can tell you, there are so many people who are never told they are loved. I come to the studio every Monday, 12 to 3, because I've got an appointment with you. I take you serious. Forget about the other person, right? Moranziwa.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege. Listen in on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
The mining ministers of Botswana and Angola recently met in Gaborone to discuss closer cooperation in the diamond industry. The talks come as the two southern African nations explore ways to jointly take control of De Beers, the diamond giant owned by Anglo-American. Botswana, which holds a 15% stake in De Beers and supplies around 70% of its rough diamonds, regards the company as a strategic national asset, even as falling global diamond prices continue to weigh on its economy. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Samosa has more.
Angola, which initially expressed interest in acquiring a minority stake in De Beers, has now tabled a bid for a controlling share, a move that could spark a bidding contest with its neighbor. During a meeting briefly opened to the media, Botswana's Minister of Mines, Boholo Joy Kinewedu, and Angola's Minister of Mineral Resources, Petroleum and Gas, Diamantino Pedro Azevedo, discussed opportunities for cooperation in the diamond sector as well as in energy and logistics. Political economist Kevin Tutani shares economic implications for Southern Africa if Botswana and Angola gains control of De Beers, given the current global slump in diamond prices.
Well, I would say as Angola and Botswana, if they do manage to get control of De Beers, for Southern Africa, this obviously will most likely embolden the governments within the region, that they also have to ensure that they're diligent and take control of their destinies. You know, remember, when it comes to diamonds, with regards to Botswana, they determine 90% of, they actually make up 90% of Botswana's exports and are around 30% of GDP, you know, a sizable amount of government revenue as well. So it is quite sensible for the government of Botswana to want to get more involvement. I mean, it only has 15% stake in De Beers at the moment.
However, he maintains that control should be exercised through reasonable means.
But advisably, that determination to have greater control should be within reasonable means and not on the basis of, senseless expropriation. Regarding to, how it might affect investor confidence, within and regional cooperation in the mining sector, well, investor confidence might be hampered, particularly if these countries, as Botswana and Angola, drive at their goal in a more of a violent manner.
Angola's Mines Ministry said in a statement that the two ministers discussed the interest of both countries in acquiring shares in the multinational De Beers, but did not provide more details. How might a potential bidding war between Botswana and Angola affect investor confidence and regional cooperation in the mining sector? Tutani explains.
Remember, if they want to have controlling stake in this company in De Beers, they have to do their best to expropriate with compensation. We really don't want to call it expropriation, particularly because when it comes to De Beers, we understand that De Beers is ready to do an initial public offering on the stock exchange. That's number one. And it's also willing to do a private placement by selling that majority stake without going the way of the stock market. So the management of De Beers has actually expressed intention to let go of this stock in a professional manner, such that there's no need for expropriation.
As Botswana and Angola weigh their next moves, the outcomes could reshape the balance of power in the global diamond trade and refine Africa's role in controlling its own mineral wealth. Whether collaboration or competition prevails, both nations are signaling a new era of assertiveness in the continent's resource economy. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samos in Johannesburg.
Okay, so there's an interview that I did yesterday regarding Job Sikala. He's an opposition figure in Zimbabwe who's been arrested more than 80 times, and he found himself in South Africa. He was driving in his, in fact, he was not driving, he was driving in his uncle's car, and with his uncle, who's over 70 years old, and police stopped them and they found explosives in the vehicle. He's saying that those explosives were planted, but he's been arrested and he's in jail at the moment. And we've been getting a lot of comments and messages from you regarding this story. And by and large, most people are saying there are two sides to this. Some are saying that, look, he really needs to be looked at and investigated. Some person even said that we've even got Zimbabwean politicians coming to South Africa to do crime. But most people are saying that they are concerned and that they believe that this is ZANU-PF that has planted these explosives, and that Job Sikala, who has been a peaceful person for more than 3 decades, would not be doing something such as this. So a mixed view, but the majority of your comments certainly are concerned that something is afoot here and that it's not as it seems. But there are people who are saying no, he planted those explosives himself, put them in his car, and he needs to be investigated.
Yeah, so that's on YouTube. And then your comments on TikTok on that very same topic that we covered yesterday. Let's read some of them. Ingrid Modis saying, why must SA be involved in Zimbabwe business? Its citizens need to rise and defend themselves. If you're going to expect help from others, then Zim will remain the way it is. Spizo also on TikTok saying politics is a dirty game. Only educated South Africans will understand. Empty vessels will make noise. Quite a few comments there as well. And then Duada Deva Malachi says they always protect each other from criminality. I'm not sure who the others are there. Freedom Tsuma saying, I've always trusted Job Sikala, even when people were saying chete chete. What is chete chete? Is that...
Only is the literal translation.
All right. And Folosi, that's the final one we'll read for time purposes, says Job Sikala is the only genuine opposition leader in Zimbabwe. He will always be persecuted. Thank you so much for all of your comments. Of course, our social media handles are at Channel Africa 1 across the various platforms of X, of YouTube, of Instagram, of Facebook, of what's the other one?
TikTok.
YouTube, I said, TikTok. Thank you so much for your comments.
Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126, and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So yeah, that's who I am, you know.
It's not just talk. It's your chance to air your views. Share your opinion. Engage with the community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Ready to connect, innovate, and be inspired? It's all happening at Africa's Tech Festival, where Africa's technology meets the world. From the 10th to the 13th of November in Cape Town, join global leaders, investors, and innovators driving the future of Africa's digital economy. Don't miss the continent's biggest week in tech. Get your pass now at africatechfestival.com.
Ukatili wa kijinsia unaharibu maisha na kutenga jamii. Hutokea nyumbani, shuleni, kazini na mara nyingi kwa ukimya. Lakini hauwezi kuendelea. Ukiona, ongea. Ikiwa unaumia, funguka, kwa sababu kutofanya lolote sio chaguo. Sikiliza vituo vyote 19 vya redio kuanzia Jumatano ya tarehe 23 Julai kwenye mijadala, ushauri, tamthilia, maonyesho ya elimu na mahojiano na wataalamu, manusura, watunga sheria na nchi nzima iliyoathirika na ukatili wa kijinsia kwenye vituo vyako pendwa vya redio. Piga simu 0800-428 ili kuripoti unyanyasaji au kupata msaada. GBV ikomeshwe na wewe. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwenu na shirika la SABC.
The rhythm of Africa, the pulse of the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective.
I'm just going to say All right, let's take a look at this story now. Today, Angola marks 50th anniversary of its independence from Portugal, commemorating half a century since the country declared freedom on the 11th of November 1975 after a 13-year war for liberation. Whilst the anniversary celebrations have been ongoing throughout 2025, many Angolans approach the date with mixed emotions. The country has made strides in rebuilding infrastructure and urban areas, yet deep social and economic inequalities persist. Millions still live in poverty and unemployment. Well, to speak a little bit more about this, we're now joined on the line by economist Daniel Tendo. Daniel, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I hope we discuss about the Angolan economy and Angolan province past 50 years of independence.
So 50 years on, what is life like for ordinary Angolans, the majority of them, and are they celebrating the 50 years, or is it another day, a difficult life? What is the state of play?
Well, first of all, we must understand that as Angola marks 50 years of independence, the country's economic history is one of the dramatic transitions from the post-war reconstruction to the future of sustainable growth. In the first decade after the end of the Civil War, from 2002 to 2011, Angola experienced one of the fastest GDP growth rates in Africa and all over the world, varying above 10% annually. This boom was largely driven by oil exports, which financed major infrastructure projects and fueled the rapid urban expansion. Inflation would have exceeded 10% of the start of the decade. However, the following decades, from 2014 to 2024, brought new challenge. The collapse in oil prices exposed a deep structurally vulnerable. Economic growth slowed by 3 to 4%. Inflation climbed back to nearly 30% in some years, and unemployment rate, especially among the youth, became one of the country's most pressing issues. Despite the reforms efforts and diversification plans, the economy remains heavily dependent on oil revenues. So these are the main issues that Angolan economy that most of the time the Angolan people see and feel that in spite of 50 years old, we still have some trouble, some issues to sort out. But as a country, day by day, we stand up and we grow day by day our country. For instance, the Angolan Human Development Index has improved modestly, but the poverty, this is one of our issues, and inequality remain high, with foreign reserve around $16 billion. The government faces due task of stabilizing macroeconomic and fundamental and building inclusive room oil driving growth. As Angolan entering 6 decades, the challenge is clear: to turn the natural wealth into human capital, strengthen institutions, and create an economic diversification. This is the issue. This is the main challenge that day by day the Angolan people fight to have.
Daniel, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you so much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us. And we wish you and the people of Angola the very best today as you celebrate independence, but also that the future is much, much brighter. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you from Angola and to people of South Africa, and we appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Muito obrigado. Adeus. Bom dia. That was Daniel Tendo, a consulting economist, speaking to us about the situation on the 50th anniversary of his country's independence.
Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
In South Africa, a new research from the University of Cape Town's Children's Institute warns that violence against women and violence against children is deeply interconnected and must be tackled together to break the cycle of harm that spans generations. The findings published in the South African Child Gauge of 2025 call for an integrated approach that links health, education, and social services to better protect both women and children. Joining us now is Professor Mercy Machisa, who is editor of the 2025 South African Child Gauge and senior specialist scientist at the South African Medical Research Council. Professor, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Thank you so much, Asanda. I'm good, thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's start with the big picture here. What is the central message of this year's Child Gauge?
So the central message is that we are saying that violence against women and violence against children are interconnected. They are not two different problems. They are problems that feed off each other. And so in terms of how we address the issues, we need to not be going ahead and doing fragmented work, but we should also break the silos of working and work together in an integrated manner so we address both problems.
The violence against women and children, according to the report, is an interconnected crisis. Can you explain then, in terms of how these forms of violence cross into each other in South African homes and communities?
Yes, so we say violence against women and violence against children are interconnected because they co-occur. So women are being abused by their partners and their children are witnessing it. And by virtue of witnessing it, they are also being traumatized. And we know that if mothers are being abused, there's also a high likelihood that children are also being abused. And in terms of that home environment, violence is normalized. So those children will then go out and we see them becoming violent even with their own peers, whether it is at school and elsewhere. But also what we have seen in our research is that there's an intergenerational cycle. And when we say intergenerational, we mean that children who experience violence, we have seen, for example, the boys who experience violence, and if that trauma is not addressed later in adulthood, they become aggressive and they become abusers themselves. Similarly, for girls who have experienced violence, then they see violence as something that is normal. And so later on in life, we see how they end up sometimes with abusive partners and are more likely to themselves be victimized. So in that way, there is an intergenerational cycle that is happening, and it's happening because these issues are interconnected.
The Child Gauge calls for an integrated response that cuts across sectors. What would that kind of a joined-up approach look like, and what poses challenges to its successful implementation?
So an integrated approach would entail that whoever is working with children, so those in the children's sector, when they are dealing with affected children, need to think beyond the child and look into the family setting. Similarly, those who are addressing violence against women and working with women, for example, the shelter sector, need to think about the children. And we've seen how historically there have always been problems where shelters admit women, but they exclude their boy children. And that in itself shows that they are not thinking really and working in an integrated manner. So that's what we are promoting. And I think what has been standing in the way for that kind of integrated working together is really around models of funding, and also around this competition, I guess, from those who are working in the children's sector and those working in the women's sector. And part of it is that much of the work that has been done around violence against women and children has been donor funded. And so there's always that competition trying to outdo each other. But also even in government, we see how the funding that is available is really streamlined per department. So Department of Social Development focuses mostly on children, on grants, on social welfare, and would not delve into the women's issues. Similarly, the Department of Women is prioritizing women, and the funding they have is for women, youth, and people with disabilities, and children get exempted. So we are seeing that this problem also has to do with how funding has been organized and sectors have been organized, whether in civil society or in government.
The gender transformative programs that the research highlights as a way forward that's more promising. Could you give us examples of what that means and how it changes attitudes?
So one of the main drivers of gender-based violence, violence against women, violence against children is really patriarchy. And when we say patriarchy, this is how the social system is organized and gives dominance to women, to men, and women being marginalized, children being marginalized. And so addressing violence really requires shifting some of the gender norms that are harmful, so that we can see more equal relationships, we can see more respect for women, and we can see different approaches in terms of raising children and disciplining children. And so when we say gender transformative, we're really talking about evidence-based programs that give spaces for men and women to be able to dialogue around these issues of gender inequality, but also give a space for people to reflect on how, those harmful gender norms affect relationships, affect how children and women live. And then through that critical reflection, hopefully getting men to reconsider some of their behaviors that are harmful to women and children.
Professor, thank you so much for your valuable insights and your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And we leave that chat there with Professor Mercy Machisa, editor of the South African Child Gauge 2025 and senior specialist scientist at the South African Medical Research Council, speaking about a recent or an urgent need, rather, for South Africa to take an integrated approach to end violence against women and children. Of course, as Rise and Shine, we dedicate our Tuesdays to topics around gender-based violence. So after the economics news later, after Nosi Zuma, we'll talk about another topic regarding this. It's 8:30 Central African Time, and it's time for news headlines. Here's Matapelo Maha.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Headlines this hour. The African Union has expressed concern regarding a severe security crisis in Mali. The crisis has been characterized by jihadist groups disrupting fuel supplies, attacking military installations and kidnapping foreign nationals. And South Africa's Deputy Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Nomalungelo Kina, says that the collaboration between South African scientists and their global peers remains vital for the advancement of science. And Ecuador's President, Daniel Noboa, says that 300 high-risk inmates have been transferred to a new prison. The move comes a day after more than 30 prisoners were killed in a violent protest against their expected relocation. More details on these and other stories at top of the hour.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, let's go to the sports desk for our final sports update right here on Rise and Shine on this Tuesday morning. Good morning, Figile Lingwat.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Peter. Once again, let's begin with football news. Amajimbo's head coach Vela Khumalo believes that if Amajimbos had proper preparation for the World Cup tournament, they would have been a different, more energized team. This after they lost 3-1 to the tournament favourites Italy. Khumalo says he's over the moon for reaching their target, which is to qualify for the knockout stages of the FIFA Under-17 World Cup. Khumalo elaborates on the preparations.
If we had a little bit of time, I think we could have been a better team. It's a makeshift team. We have Oskoko Malenga playing as a right back, and we all know that he's an attacker. And we're converting. We are patching, man. It's one of these things, but it's okay, man. We're playing against the best in the world, so we must not take that for granted.
For South African football is bright. This time needs to be nurtured on and off the field. Khumalo has more.
This bunch of players that we are having are going to make the country very proud, and they will grow and become better players. I so hope that whoever that we get, we execute our plan to the latter. If we can do it right, I can tell you anything is possible, like I've been saying it. In the knockout stage, anything and everything is possible. We're playing on Friday, and we still have time to recuperate. We still have time to regenerate, and directly after that will be good. And obviously, the only thing that they will be doing now, which is good, and time for them to do their assessment from school, and it will be good for them to concentrate on their exams.
Egypt is taking a full-strength squad to the AIN International Cup in the United Arab Emirates this month. This is as they prepare for the Total Energies CAF Africa Cup of Nations finals in Morocco, where it will be looking for its first continental title in 15 years. Egypt has won more Cup of Nations crowns than any other country, but its last success came in 2010. The Pharaohs will be among the more fancied teams at the tournament in North Africa, where it is paired in Group B with Angola, South Africa and Zimbabwe. Coach Hossam Hassan has selected 26 players for the AIN International Cup, where Egypt takes on fellow World Cup finalists Uzbekistan on the 14th of November and then plays next game against either Cape Verde or Iran. The matches are all at the Hazza bin Zayed Stadium. On to cricket news. South Africa's Proteas face a stern challenge in Kolkata this Friday as they take on India in the next leg of the World Test Championship title defense. With just 3 days to prepare, the squad arrives off a gritty win in Rawalpindi, but Eden Gardens is no easy stage. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figede Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Gender-based violence is destroying lives and tearing communities apart. It happens in homes, in schools, at workplaces, and too often in silence. But it doesn't have to continue. If you see it, speak out. If you are hurting, reach out. Because doing nothing is not an option. Listen to all 19 SABC radio stations from Wednesday, 23rd of July for hard talk, discussions, advice, dramas, educational shows, and interviews around GBV with experts, survivors, lawmakers, and the whole country affected by gender-based violence. For all your favorite SABC radio stations, call 0800 428 428 to report abuse or get help. GBV, it ends with you. This message is brought to you by the SABC. Stay tuned to Channel Africa. Stream us on our new and updated website, channelafrica.co.za.
Let's say good morning now to Nosi Pozuma, and she brings us our business news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. In your business news, the SAWA, the International Monetary Fund, which is the IMF, has discussed various options with Senegal to address the country's significant debt vulnerabilities. Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko have accused fund officials of pushing for a restructuring of Senegal's debt, a move he says the government will not accept. The IMF spokesperson says a discussion of the policy choices that Senegal faces was part of the fund's role to offer expert analysis and advice for government's consideration. The IMF held a mission to Dakar that ended last week. The Organization Undoing Tax Abuse in South Africa, OUTA, says the constant postponement in the rollout of the administrative adjudication of the road or traffic offences, or ARTO, proves that the system is unworkable in its current form. The Transport Minister, Barbara Creecy, has announced that the rollout of the system, which was due to start next month, has been postponed to July next year. Creecy said the postponement was necessary as some municipalities are not ready. ARTO aims to curb the high number of road fatalities in the country, among other things. OUTA CEO Wayne Juvenage.
The system is so administratively challenged, it's very cumbersome, it hasn't really involved enough of meaningful stakeholder input. We keep telling them this, so we're not surprised this is pushed out again, and we don't even think it'll be ready to be launched in July next year. You remember even 2 ministers ago, it was Fikile Mbalula who was there saying it's coming now, get ready. And here we sit 2 years later. So yeah, it's a long way off, we believe.
South Africa's Communications and Digital Technologies Minister Solly Malatsi says artificial intelligence, or AI, must be used to support democracy, not frustrated. Malatsi says AI comes with risks of manipulation, especially for achieving political ends. He was speaking yesterday on the opening day of the 3-day Africa Tech Festival in Cape Town, aimed at charting a way forward for Africa's digital economy.
Any technology must be geared towards enhancing our democratic principles, uplifting communities, and most importantly, steering governments towards better governance. But we know, particularly with AI, in particular generative AI, that it comes with risks, particularly those that may be manipulated and in the political context to spread misinformation. And that's why there's always a major focus on the ethical use of AI.
The Public Service Commission's quarterly bulletin has revealed a regression and the timely payment of invoices to service providers by South African government departments in the 2024-2025 financial year. The PSC says there was a 32% regression in unpaid invoices compared to the 2023-2024 financial year. Now, commissioners want consequence management instituted against accounting officers who fail to pay service providers within 30 days of receipt of an invoice. Anele Koia is a public service commissioner.
The number of invoices paid later than 30 days by national departments was 143,245 invoices, with a rand value of 6.4 billion as at end of financial year. This indicates a regression of 32% or 34,328 invoices when compared to the number of invoices paid after 30 days by national departments in the 2023-24 financial year.
And finally, oil prices have dipped in early Asian trade today, trimming gains from previous session as oversupply concerns outweighed optimism over a potential resolution to the U.S. government shutdown. Brent crude futures fell 13 U.S. cents to $63.93 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was at $60 a barrel, also down 13 cents. Now, both benchmarks gained around 40 cents in the previous session. Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 435, and Botswana is 13 pula 132. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 2, and in Zambia is 22 kwacha 64. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 ril 33. Russia is 80 rubles 88. India is 88 rupees 62. China at 17 yuan 29, and in South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 58. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,138 and platinum at $1,576 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $63.91 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nusipho Suma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
South Africa's struggle with gender-based violence is often described as a second pandemic, but every now and then a powerful idea breaks through the despair. One of those ideas was born from heartbreak after a young relative was killed in an act of gender-based violence in Cape Town. Activist Leonora Tim decided that she couldn't simply mourn, she had to build something. The result is grit. That's Gender Rights in Tech, a digital platform designed to give survivors a safe, discreet place to speak, be heard, and to seek help. And at the center of it is Zuzi, an AI-powered auntie who listens without judgment and guides users towards support services. What began as a personal mission has now become one of Africa's most celebrated tech for good tools. And to talk us through this journey and its impact, we're now joined by Grit founder and managing director Leonora Tim. Leonora, thanks so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Leonora, this platform was born from a deeply personal tragedy. How did that experience shape the way that you design Grit and what you hope that it will do and what role it would play for survivors?
So I think when the incident happened, I think for me what stood out the most was the silence around the incident. You know, this was a young woman. She was 19 years old. She was 9 months pregnant at the time of her murder. And that kind of situation in South Africa is so normalized that it wasn't even newsworthy. And her family really struggled in the days afterwards, accessing services, support systems. The DNA backlog at that time was very high. And so when we went into designing the technology, that whole experience really guided how we did so. So we went into communities, we spoke to people, over 800 people for our initial tech, where we asked them how they're using their tools currently, who would they like to respond to their tool, like an emergency situation. And then we built it out from there. And then we went back to the same community and showed the tool and asked, did it work? Was it good? Was it not? And the first one, people were like, no, this is horrific. Like, this doesn't work. It's super inaccessible. So then we went back again, we built it, we rebuilt it, so that we really made sure that the community's voice and the lived experiences of survivors was held at the center of the tech that we're building.
And so Zuzi was born, and she's been described as an AI aunt, warm, trustworthy, non-judgmental. What kind of reactions and feedback have you been receiving from women and families who've interacted with Zuzi?
So when we created Zuzi, we went into communities again and we asked people, what should she look like? Should it be a she? Should it be a he? Should it be a robot? Non-gendered, what kind of personality? Nobody wanted a lawyer, very big opposition to a lawyer. Social worker was kind of a bit like maybe, but everyone wanted this vision of an aunt, but even to the physical depiction of what she looked like. So then when we took Zuzi back in to do testing with the same communities that we'd built with, people were very surprised, I think, because they're not used to having tech that looks or sounds like them, because tech is often not built for the majority population group. So people were surprised first of all, wow, she's really pretty. Wow, she looks like me, or she speaks like me, and she understands, like, you know, we went through a phase recently where she was a little bit overly trained and she kept on saying "you're" to people. But the idea is like that she is trained to understand slang and local language and speaks, and she picks up on the tone in which you are speaking and responds like that. It's definitely not perfect, and it's definitely still needs work. AI has risks and is problematic. But I do think on the whole, people are often just surprised at the way in which she speaks to them in a way that is normal and understandable.
It's a really sensitive subject matter, and sometimes AI, whilst it can sound emotional and sensitive, it is a machine in the end and a program. How have you been able to try and capture that empathy, that tone that's required, particularly in sensitive scenarios such as the ones that it's working in?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. We have done testing all over the country with over 2,000 people. I think one thing we've learned is that you can't please everyone, but you want a majority satisfaction rate, right? But she also can't be too empathetic, because what we got at the beginning was, people also don't want to feel like it is a robot. So you don't want to just be like, shame, I know what you're feeling, because there's absolutely no way it's a bot. So it's like a fine balance We did tweak the persona a couple of weeks ago to try and make it a bit shorter, because young people often complain that she speaks too much, because I think especially the younger generation don't read excessively long pieces of material. But then when we shortened her response, she then became quite abrupt. So it's also balancing that within AI. And it is a bit of a balancing game, constantly going in and tweaking the persona. She also has a couple of different AI assistants within her persona, which might pick up like a specific challenge that is related to a specific demographic group. And then that persona will come in, and it's trained on very specific context, for example. So yeah, it's a game of balance, I think, is the answer.
What are you finding that Zuzi is helping with most? Women in these kinds of scenarios, what kind of help are they seeking, and what are the kind of conversations that Zuzi is having?
So I actually just did an analysis of the conversations the other day. Alarmingly and horrifyingly, one of the biggest trends that we saw actually is child disclosures of abuse and sexual assault. And this is something we're now navigating internally because it's exceptionally complicated. But then outside of that, a few around like tech facilitated GBV, we see that somewhat. And then a lot of conversations actually around women asking questions on economic empowerment and how they can upskill themselves and how they can get training, those kind of things. I think it's a sign of the economy that we sit in currently. And then just general chattiness. We find that people come in and just chat, some homework requests, and which she doesn't answer, and some things like that.
Well done on this innovation, and I think it's such a wonderful gift to our continent. Thank you so much indeed for talking us through this. Sad that it was born out of tragedy, but I think the many, many, many women that it can help and save has been a wonderful gift as well. Thank you so much, Leonora.
Thank you for your time.
That's Leonora Tima, who's the founder, managing director of Gender Rights in Tech Grit, formerly Kwanele, which is an AI tool for women that they can use, particularly those that are facing or have suffered gender-based violence. It's 10 to 9, which means it's time to have a chat with the On The Move team that are going to be with us after the 9 o'clock news.
Yes.
A very good morning to you, Vanessa.
Morning guys. How are you?
Morning.
Well, we're looking forward to the show today. We're going to be speaking about mourning in the first hour of the show, and there are a lot of traditions that we as African people have towards mourning, but it's also the modern times, and some of those are sometimes inconvenient or sometimes set on standards that aren't as great in modern times. So we're going to be speaking about that today, how we can still honor the cultural expectations of mourning and grieving, but blending that with maybe dumbing down some of them, blending them with some of those modern traditions, or just modernity in general in the first hour of the show. So we're going to be looking at that. And then we move on to chat about, these days word of mouth is everything. But it turns out even for employers, word of mouth matters the most now. So for new recruits and people who are trying to get in the company, these days they just go online and check what other people who've been recruited or who try to get recruited into a certain company or brand think about the brand itself. So it seems like companies have to start working on their brand and their word of mouth.
Yeah, absolutely right. My wife's a lawyer, and one of the things that for a practice to grow literally is word of mouth. What people say about you determines how successful you may become. That is such a powerful thing. But it can be negative as well, hey?
I was thinking that as you're saying that. Because at some point there has to be a balance as the person who's doing the research to bear in mind as you do the research that some of them could be personal.
And the mourning thing as well, I get a sense sometimes that it's becoming very commercial. The way people have to dress up, and it becomes an event rather than actually a mourning moment.
But I mean, the mourning, it's not just the day of the event being the
Yes,
funeral.
yes.
There's days before, days after, and traditions that have to be observed. Some people have to cut their hair. Women would have said, you guys can't go to work for a certain amount of time. Now people have to work. They're like, okay, maybe let me leave a little bit earlier. The way that you dress for a while after that, how long you have to mourn.
Right.
It's not just the day.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
really is
yeah.
sometimes years
Yeah.
that has been put in place.
All right, interesting topics coming
Yeah.
up there. That's on the move.
Be inspired. Stay informed. Channel Africa, the beauty of life. Now available anytime, anywhere with our new app.
Let's take a look at this story now. There's speculation that South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana may formally announce a new inflation target at the upcoming medium-term budget policy statement. Recently, ratings agency Fitch said it expected the National Treasury to reveal the new inflation target, which the Reserve Bank would then have to implement. This follows the Reserve Bank's MPC interest rate announcement in July that it will target the bottom end of the 3 to 6% target range with immediate effect. Nompumelelo Siziba spoke to economic experts about the impact the current 3 to 6% target range has had on the South African economy and where to next.
The 3 to 6% inflation target was introduced in the year 2000. Inflation targeting is used as a means to help anchor inflation expectations. High inflation erodes the value of a given currency, and so taming inflation is key for central banks to ensure that their currencies maintain good value and remain stable. Visiting professor at Wits University, Yanni Rousseau, says the current inflation target of 3 to 6% has served the local economy well.
The inflation target announced in 2000 served South Africa well. It has brought down both the inflation rate and inflation expectations to within the target range of 3 to 6%. Around 2001, there was an attempt to introduce a lower target rate of 3 to 5%, but that never materialized as a result of international financial uncertainty. So we've had the target range of 3 to 6% for this whole period.
Having the inflation targeting regime is said to have brought about a level of certainty and has been pivotal for all actors in the economy, especially for business players. Head of SA Macroeconomic Fixed Income and Currency Research at Standard Bank, Dr. Elna Moolman, explains.
So if I'm a business, I know that inflation will be somewhere between 3 and 6%, and I can plan around it, and I don't really have to worry about higher inflation. I know that over the long term, we may have some years that's slightly higher, but then we'll compensate for that and have years that are a little bit lower. And over the last couple of years in particular, the Reserve Bank went further to make it clear it wants 4.5%, the middle of that range. So it makes it even easier. I know that inflation should be 4.5%. I can plan according to that, etc. And so that's the big advantage, and that then makes it easier to invest and run your business, etc.
While the Reserve Bank firmly announced that it's now targeting the bottom end of the 3 to 6% inflation target range in July, technically the National Treasury is the one that's meant to formulate the inflation rate target with the help of the Reserve Bank's expertise and formally announce the policy target position. Professor Rousseau is advocating for another target range, albeit lower than the current one, and says it's important that there's alignment on the policy between the central bank and Treasury sooner rather than later.
I'm in favor of a 3% inflation target, but with a range of 1 percentage point on either side. So yes, the target is 3%, but 1 percentage point below and 1 percentage point above to give us 2 to 4%. So I support the Reserve Bank targeting 3%. We need the government and the National Treasury to support this target. So my hope is that the Minister will announce the 3% target with a range around it in the upcoming MTBPS on the 12th of November. However, if the Minister does not announce this lower target, we can end up in the dangerous situation where the Reserve Bank targets inflation at 3% and the Treasury uses 4.5% as an inflation, call it, target or objective in their fiscal planning. And you can't have monetary policy heading towards a 3% target and fiscal policy working on a 4.5% target, that would be a very unsatisfactory outcome which South Africa cannot afford.
The formal inflation target range may or may not be announced on the 12th of November, but Dr. Moorman says what will be important is that there's buy-in from all sectors of society on whatever is decided.
It's unfortunately still very difficult to know whether he'll make the final call now or whether he'll just give us further guidance in terms of the Treasury's thoughts around the Reserve Bank's proposal for a point target of 3% and perhaps where he is with the negotiations with other stakeholders. Because what Treasury is emphasizing is that the more we have buy-in, the more everybody in the economy believes that this is going to happen, that this will be a good thing, that this is actually achievable, the easier it will be to actually achieve that on a sustainable basis.
Even if Godongwana doesn't announce the new inflation target range at the midterm budget this week, given joint assurances from both the Reserve Bank and National Treasury that the policy formulation work is done and dusted, and the importance of perceived policy alignment, the chances of an announcement soon, but at a later stage, appear high. Nompumelelo Siba, SABC News, Johannesburg.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
And this is how we say goodbye as the Rise and Shine team. My name is Asanda Beda.
Nami Ngingu Peter Ndoro. Sure. Etada.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Top stories this hour. The African Union has expressed concern over security crisis in Mali and 300 high-risk inmates moved in Ecuador. With the news at 9 o'clock, I'm Matapala Mahape. Good morning.